and in the uh, Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Now, in the case of our councils, each of the councils had an increase, although not much. And in the case of our service agencies, PBOX had a reduction of 133.355 million. Okay, mostly earmarked for new stations and new equipment. Now, the next slide shows uh, the significant accomplishments. First of all, in our effort to achieve inclusive development, we supported the establishment of 23 niche research centers in the regions. So these are now, there are 23 that have been set up so far in 16 regions, and we have supported them with 854 million pesos going into facilities improvement and R&D projects. We also approved 49 collaborative projects between industry and research institutions. CRADLE stands for Collaborative Research to leverage the Philippine economy. Collaborative research and development to leverage the Philippine economy. This is our way of encouraging partnerships between industry and particularly the academe. As we know, both would like to do R&D. The academe have the people to do the R&D, but sometimes the choice of topics are really mostly intended for publications. Uh, but in the case of industry, they want to address their problems and they want to come up with innovative products and technologies, but they don't have the people to do the R&D. So we encourage them to partner, and so far we have approved a total funding of 222 million for this in 16 regions. We also are strengthening the research capabilities of so-called host institutions. These are actually the NICERs and the would-be NICERs, and we send to them very experienced research and development leaders who will try to help them with their efforts to upgrade. So these are nationally recognized and renowned research and development leaders who agreed to be based in the provinces for a particular period of time. And of course, we had so far conducted consultations on the business innovation for science and technology. This is really our assistance to enterprises who want to set up their own R&D facilities in their respective workplaces. In terms of human resource development, we are actually proud that so far the number of scholars that we have been supporting have been consistently increasing. And actually, this is one of the areas where we have been getting budget increases. So that in 2019 to 2020, our scholars that we support number at 42,190. And for this new school year, we are supporting 44,398. And when we go to next year, we expect that we will be supporting 52,946. Actually, the increase in our budget of almost 3 point, I think that is 3.4 million, more than 2 billion, more than 2 billion of that is going to increase in scholarships. And we can say that this is very important, not only to develop our manpower in science and technology, but this is really one way of lifting families out of poverty. Most of our scholars are taken from the below poverty level sector. In the case of our research and development programs, our major programs, of course, we are very happy that we have been doing this for quite some time now, and it is very timely. So these are the initiatives on drug discovery and development, particularly those coming from our rich biodiversity. The implementation of the malnutrition reduction program, wherein we were able to establish 8 new complementary food processing facilities and to monitor 37 that have been put up in the past years. Although this one requires a lot more units of complementary food processing facilities. We have, of course, uh, done R&D and achieved a number of accomplishments in terms of transportation or mobility. We have finished our hybrid train, hybrid electric road train, and we are just awaiting action on the commercialization adoption of these. And we can give details of that later on. And then by December, we will launch our hybrid trimaran fast crop. Actually, this is a combination of passenger and cargo trimaran with a new design so that it can utilize the wave energy as it runs, thereby reducing the fuel requirements by about 25%. This is an all-Filipino initiative. The trimaran is about to be completed. It is being assembled in Aklan, New Washington. Our implementers are the Aklan State University and a private Filipino-owned shipbuilding company whose owners are actually former OFWs in shipbuilding from uh, Norway. Then we have established Natural Dye Center and the Regional Yarn Production and Innovation Center for the textile industry. We really consider this as a major innovation because of the Yarn Production and Innovation Center, the local produce of fiber, particularly the local cotton production in Region 6 now finds a ready processing facility so that they can be converted into yarns and this will be used in the local garment industry in Region 6. Then we have actually added additional infrastructure. This is the Advanced Manufacturing Center, which is really world-class, and this will be featuring additive manufacturing, like 3D printing to develop products and prototypes. And we have also the Amerial. This is the Advanced Mechatronics and Robotics Laboratory. These are both located in the area of the Metals Industry Research and Development Center. This particularly the Amerial or the Mechatronics and Robotics will be very active in our program to upgrade our small and medium enterprises to really approach the Industry 4.0 standards. And then, of course, we are proud of our R&D initiatives on space technology. And one of the accomplishments, although it did not become part of DOST, is the establishment of the Philippine Space Agency. And we have, of course, with us today, the first Director General of the Philippine Space Agency, who was formerly our Director of the Advanced Science and Technology Institute of DOST, Dr. Joel Marciano. And we established ground receiving stations to complement the satellites that are in orbit and also to gather data from other satellites with whom we have, the owners of whom we have collaboration. The the last two slides actually gives details of the significant accomplishments. I will not go through them one by one, but we have assisted small and medium enterprises in technology upgrading. We have expanded our unified laboratory services, which now integrates the services of 23 DOST and 31 non-DOST laboratories all over the country, plus 8 international member laboratories located in Australia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates, and Vietnam. We started it, but there are now laboratories in other countries which have joined our network. And this is very good because even if we do not have the facility here, we can easily have them tested in other laboratories to serve our industries in particular. We have expanded our online ordering and delivery system, the One Store program, which originally was intended only for companies which were assisted by DOST, but now it has expanded to cover any enterprise for as long as they meet certain requirements that like FDA approval, official registration, and others. And the Technology Business Incubation Program, it was mentioned here that we have established 19 technology business incubators spread all over the country in 8 innovation hubs, but we have already acted to round this up to 20 or even 21 in the next few months. Then we have the community empowerment to science and technology. These are really to serve the poorest of the poor and marginalized communities by bringing to them science and technology in various aspects of their life. Then we have our participation in the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation management programs. The Philippines is recognized as one of those that are leading in the region as far as R&D in disaster risk reduction is concerned. Most of these are really in the areas operated by Pag-asa, by PBOTS, and our Advanced Science and Technology Institute. And finally, on the COVID-19 initiatives, we just want to go through them. We follow the so-called 4K framework, kalusugan, kabuhayan, kaayusan at kinabukasan to address COVID-19 concerns. And in kalusugan, we have, of course, the development of our local diagnostic kits, the clinical trials ongoing for different natural products, as well as non-natural products which have been found to have beneficial effects to COVID-19 patients. We are working very closely with the World WHO for the solidarity trials in both vaccines and therapeutics. And we have, of course, funded and we have already good results in the case of PPEs, medical devices, and accessories to help our frontliners. And there are actually several that are still ongoing. And we would like to mention at this point the initiative of DOST to establish the Virology Science and Technology Institute of the Philippines, or simply the Virology Institute of the Philippines, so that we will have capability to develop our own therapeutics, vaccines, and diagnostic kits for diseases that are introduced because of virus. And in the case of kabuhayan, we are doing our part in the case of enabling our returned overseas Filipino workers who would like to set up their technology-based micro-enterprises. This is to distinguish our program from the rest, which are giving livelihood programs or looking for jobs for them. In this particular case, we are helping them put up their technology-based micro-enterprises. And we have now an ongoing batch of 98 which have passed our screening, and are ongoing now is their phase one of assistance, which is really basically training on both enterprise management and in technologies of their choice. We have also a new program called iStart, which is Innovation, Science, and Technology for accelerating regional technology-based development. We are fielding scientists, researchers, and engineers to help those both local government units and prospective investors in if they want to put up new investments in technology-based industries in the area. And of course, we are busy also in helping through our activities related to remote learning. And no, that should go to kinabukasan. These are the technology courses offered by our institutes that can help people put up their enterprises and livelihood activities. An example of that is the Galing Picard, which is really livelihood on agri and aqua. And kaayusan, of course, has been our concern, being part of the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases, We have helped the IATF in terms of the disease modeling faster for COVID, in terms of the model for new growth centers, which was done by the UP School for School of Urban and Regional Planning. We commissioned them to do it. We have, of course, implemented Rapid Pass. And what is the other pass? Safe Pass. So the Rapid Pass is at checkpoints. The Safe Pass is for buildings. And the tracing for allocation of medical supplies. This is an app. And the Project Ramdam, which is helping our LGUs in terms of resource allocation, management, distribution, and monitoring. And finally, this is the one I was referring to. We have been helping DepEd in terms of delivering science and technology learning modules through remote learning. That also includes the initiatives of our Philippine Science High School, which is very willing to help other schools in adapting their curricular adjustments and their blended learning modes under COVID-19 environment. So this, Your Honor, is our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Secretary De La Peña. And would like to note of what you mentioned, and we commend and congratulate the DOST family despite of the pandemic, despite of the fact that in the passage of Bayanihan 1 and 2, hindi ho kayo humingi o nanghingi doon sa pondo doon, and yet Philippines has ranked top 50 out of 131 economies in the Global Innovation Index 2020. So congratulations. Perhaps we'll talk about it later, what happened and what we have been doing. But at this juncture, before we continue, let me acknowledge our distinguished colleagues virtually present here today. Senator Bongo, Senator Coco Pimentel, and Senator Amy Marcos. Good morning and thank you for joining us, dear colleagues. We'll give the floor now, if you may, distinguished colleagues. The Philippine Space Agency would have I think only 5 slides anyway. Perhaps we can continue with the presentation and then we'll ask questions. Sir, DG Joel, you're recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good morning po sa inyong lahat. Can we go to the slides of the Philippine Space Agency po? Okay. Ito po ang aming presentation. No? Medyo may clear naman po at very straightforward. Okay na po. Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So the title of our presentation reflects, in a way, our mantra at the Philippine Space Agency. The nation bridged, uplifted, and empowered through space. And our goal is really to create and add value in space through data, industry, and people. So, magandang umaga po, Joel Marciano. PhilSA is about a year old, no? But we have really started operating and mobilizing since March of this year. Republic Act 11363 established the Philippine Space Development and Utilization Policy and the Philippine Space Agency, and for other purposes. It was signed by the President on August 8 last year, and I was appointed to the position in January, and since March, we have been mobilizing. In the Philippine Space Act, there are the following key development areas in space science, technology, and applications: national security and development, hazard management and climate studies, space research and development, education and awareness, space industry capacity building, and international cooperation. So let me say at this juncture that even though PhilSA is a new agency, we are building from the ground up, yes, which is a good thing, but we are not starting from scratch. And that is largely because of the prior and ongoing efforts of the Department of Science and Technology in funding and promoting space science and technology and application programs, many of which, some of which have been mentioned by the Honorable Secretary de la Peña in the previous presentation. So next slide. So what you see here is really, next slide, thank you. The PhilSA, in Section 25 of Republic Act 11363, was allotted an initial appropriation of 1 billion pesos coming from the Office of the President for its initial operating year. Upon mobilizing in March this year, we immediately got in touch with the Office of the President and the Department of Budget and Management in order to access this funding. However, because of current constraints in resources and also the inability to program that budget into the OP during last year's budget cycle, this 1 billion initial operating fund of the PhilSA became unavailable po. So upon discussion with DBM and OP, what we proposed was to, if this funding was not going to be available to PhilSA in 2020, which is our initial operating year, then we will propose it po sana in our 2021 budget. So what you see there in the table is a total proposal of 1.676 billion pesos divided into our general administrative services and our operations. And maybe just to quickly highlight, the bulk of the operations budget is in MOE. You see there an amount of 1.074 billion pesos. And that is really to continue the satellite development efforts that have been started by the DOST and which PhilSA is expected to take over. So there are existing infrastructure, technological capabilities, and personnel that are available to the PhilSA now. So while we are building from the ground up, we're not starting from scratch precisely because of these available capabilities, people, and infrastructure that have been put in place. Now, in the 2021 NEP, what was retained there is really the MOE under the gas of the PhilSA with an amount of 113,717,000. Now, with regard to personnel services, because the organizational structure and staffing pattern of the PhilSA is still under final review by the DBM, then we were assured that for 2021, the PS budget of the PhilSA and its requirements will be funded through the Miscellaneous Personnel Benefit Fund, the so-called MPBF. So what this really reflects in our view with regard to the 2021 NEP is a budget that would enable the PhilSA to just get started and established. However, as mentioned, there are ongoing activities that the PhilSA will be building upon and which are part of its operations, which we hope would still be made available. So next slide. Let me talk a little bit more about a couple of these flagship initiatives of the PhilSA. The first one is what we call Build in Space, or B3IS. And it is a reflection of the Philippine satellites as a vital component of information infrastructure that promotes digital inclusion, a digital economy, and a digital government. So in this proposal, we intend to build, launch, and operate a 100 to 150 kilogram small satellite that will cater to data requirements of various sectors and groups in the country. Now, the funding for this project has initially been provided by the DOST grants in aid to the tune of 370 million, and this covers the first year of this project, 2020. The PhilSA is counted upon to fund the succeeding phase of this project and to absorb the personnel, the skilled personnel that will be part of the project. So shown there on the table is the full requirement for 2021, which is not in the NEP. And we have also put in there a couple of prioritization options, priority 1, 2, 3, varying degrees of prioritization, which, well, in the last priority 3, we are going to forego the satellite and just build the peripheral infrastructure that would help build it perhaps sometime in the near future, but maybe not for next year. So yung po yung differences in those columns. Priority 1, we will continue with the satellite development with launch and then accompany that with the clean room. We will forego some of the additional payload development. With priority 2, we will forego the clean room. We'll just focus on the satellite development. And then priority 3, just the clean room, and the satellite will not be funded. Next slide. Now, the other flagship initiative of the PhilSA is what we call mobilizing satellite images and other spaceborne data for digital inclusion, economy, and government. This is the downstream segment of space. Essentially, we see these satellites and are present in space as part of a national infrastructure that would yield valuable data and information for data-driven policies and evidence-based programs. The PhilSA will be institutionalizing the operations of a couple of DOST-initiated programs, namely the Remote Sensing and Data Science Help Desk, or DATOS, which provides satellite image and data processing to government agencies, and also our ground receiving stations, which we call PEDRO, Philippine Earth Data Resource and Observation Center, and they operate the country's ground receiving stations located in Quezon City and in Davao City. So the full requirement for this is 140.4 million, and then we have trimmed that down, the second priority, to 64 million, wherein we forego the procurement or availment of satellite images. Next slide. Now, last point po is that, as you can see in the NEP, it's all MOE. Wala pong capital outlay ang PhilSA. But this is essential in this day and age, especially as we continue to work from home and with arrangements, work arrangements that are remote. So as PhilSA builds up, we would need, of course, workstations and computers and laptops. And I understand perhaps the moratorium on procuring vehicles might apply to organizations that already have vehicles. But for PhilSA, we currently do not have any. And we were fortunate to be able to borrow one vehicle from the Office of the President, but it needs to be returned at some point. So that is why we listed it as a prioritization or capital outlay requirements. So last slide na po. Let me end this presentation by sharing with everybody the mission and vision of our new Philippine Space Agency. The PhilSA envisions a Filipino nation bridged, uplifted, and empowered to the peaceful uses of outer space. And our mission is to promote and sustain a robust Philippine space ecosystem that adds and creates value in space for and from Filipinos and for the world. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director General Joel. We'll start the ball rolling by giving the floor to the chairman of the Committee on Finance, Chairman Senator Sani Angara. Sir, boss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Joel, and good morning to the DOST family led by Secretary Boy. Maybe I'll throw out a few questions there, and then anyone can answer. Because some are for PhilSA, some are for the department at large. We all know the budget for, I think, R&D is insufficient and historically has been insufficient. So maybe we'll ask for a priority list of additional R&D that perhaps the chairman might wish to endorse to the larger committee. And if he does so, then of course we will look at that. And my question, I guess, for the secretary is, congratulations for, I know you've been doing a lot with very little, and that's been the lot of the DOST, and hopefully that will change, no? But in terms of 21st century industries, Secretary, Mr. Chairman, how can we kind of leverage our maybe, what's the word? To leapfrog, I think is what I'm trying to say, into those industries and create some kind of favorable ecosystem for that. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on these things. So like things like fintech, data science, analytics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, genomics, artificial intelligence, robotics, new energy, all of these. Ano po ang may potential po dyan in terms of ramping up and in terms of leveraging our limited resources, Mr. Secretary? That's quite a difficult question, so I'll throw out my other questions to the PhilSA in the meantime while you're trying to compose an answer, Secretary Boy. No, I have some questions for the PhilSA. Maybe again you can give your priority list to the chair of the subcommittee, and he will be in charge of prioritizing what given the limited resources. It's very difficult to budget in the time of COVID, Your Honors, no, as you realize. So we really have to make some difficult and wise choices. And in case, so for PhilSA rather, could you tell us regarding your proposed flagship projects for the satellites, what do we get for the various, for non-scientists like most of us here, what do we get for the full, the priority 1, the priority 2, the priority 3, dun sa vital IT infrastructure, and then dito naman sa Datos and Pedro, what exactly are we getting there? That seems to be a more manageable number, no? So, given the choice, we'd like to know what are we talking about here? When you say satellite image and data processing, is that something that perhaps our defense agencies could use, or our DILG or our DND could use? Director Joel?
Please.
May I
Yeah,
go ahead po?
yes, please reply while DOST is collating their answers. Please.
Yes, thank you po. Thank you, Senator Angara and Mr. Chair, for that. Let me start with the build in space. So there are, this program is about continuing our satellite development efforts. And when we talk about infrastructure or things that our country needs, for example, let's say helicopters or jet fighters, then we acquire them po, no? But rarely do we get access to the underlying technology components of these items. But in space, there are opportunities that exist for us to gain access to the underlying technology. And that's precisely because we send our engineers and scientists to build these satellites themselves. So when they come back, or of course later on they can do it here, they retain the know-how and that technology, and they bring it back to our shores, and we can now start engaging other groups. Of course, industry. We want to cascade this know-how to industry, and that would be the start of a local industry development in space technology, or in general, in building products that are difficult. Difficult, high barrier to entry, and also very competitive. So it can be a good area for our country in terms of our semiconductor, electronics, IT, machining, and mechanical industry to be capable in supplying the global and burgeoning demand for these satellites. So anything that requires high reliability, robust technology, whether it is in space or whether we put it 200 feet underground in wells or in mines, etc., we need this kind of technologies. So with regard to this prioritization po, well, as mentioned, ang DOST po nagpondo na ng initial tranche for building our next satellite. And this satellite is an Earth observation satellite. That means it carries cameras. And by carrying cameras, it gets data, no, of our environment, of our surroundings, bodies of water, vegetation, land areas, etc. So that is the purpose of this satellite. And as mentioned, we're not just acquiring a satellite. By building it with our engineers and scientists, we're gaining access to the underlying technologies. And that is a good priority for us because it helps us to also build industries, and not to mention the data that we will get from this satellite. In terms of priority 1 po, ang full priority is of course the requirements for 2021 of this satellite, which is building the satellite itself, putting the corresponding payloads and peripheral systems in this satellite, and also building on the ground this facility that will enable us, when our engineers come back and, to build the satellite again, which we can because we have access to underlying technologies, we have a clean room, no, and other relevant facilities. So that's a full priority. In priority 1 po, we forego some additional payload. We focus on the satellite and the clean room. In priority 2, we forego the clean room. We just focus on the satellite development. And last, the priority 3 is really just the clean room. So yun po yung satellite development. Now, regarding the second flagship project, yung mobilizing satellite images, ang balak po natin dito is to complement the satellites that we are building, we also need access to satellites of other countries and even commercial satellites. So So this is in the form of getting image data from them. So our funding requirement is really to continue gaining access to these satellites and the data that they can provide, because otherwise what we can do is just build more of our satellites so that we can cover the spatial and temporal intervals that we need to cover our country. But in the absence of that, we continue to rely on satellites abroad. No? So then we also need corresponding infrastructure that will enable us to expand further yung capability natin to process this data. And dyan po ginagamitan natin ng mga nabanggit niyo po kanina, yung mga artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are new technologies. Well, of course, very relevant technologies now, not necessarily new, but we apply them on satellite images. And this is part of building our knowledge workforce as well. So the priority one here is foregoing the subscription to satellite images and just focusing on equipment on the ground that will expand our capability to process satellite images. Ang PhilSA po kasi, ang eventual home niyan is in Clark, in the Clark Special Economic Zone. So we want also to build a high-performance computing facility doon that will enable us to serve that surrounding area outside of Metro Manila with this computing capability. So, yun po muna.
Thank you. Senator Angara, if with the indulgence of Senator Angara, can I just follow up on something?
Please, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Director General Joel, you made mention about your priority to launch yung satellite imaging and data and imaging satellite. No, ang question ko, why not, or is it more of a priority than launching telecom sa satellite? Won't a Philippine-made telecom satellite make internet cheaper? I was just thinking about it because, you know, this is very important because a lot of people would think that there's a certain misconception na pag sinabi na itong Philippine Space Agency its main priority is to launch an astronaut in space. Diba? And PhilSA aims to build telecommunications na binabanggit niyo kanina. I think, I don't know, when it comes to priority, don't you think it's more of a priority to build telecom satellite para, kasi especially now, I think it is crucial na ma-increase natin yung demand for internet bandwidth to support our work from home arrangements, etc. Please.
Thank you po, Mr. Chair. That's a very important question. Yes, in my mind po, well, the satellites can be used for telecommunications and for Earth observation. And what we have been in the past more focused on are Earth observation satellites. Excuse me. So Earth observation satellites carrying cameras. But certainly, yes, there is a need to have better connectivity and to serve rural places which are beyond the reach of current telco facilities. And I think a satellite overhead has been proven time again, and it's nothing new really. It's not new technology. Other countries similarly situated like the Philippines, archipelagos elsewhere also rely on these satellites. I think it's a question also. The technology is available. It is possible to. There are already satellites overhead covering with footprints covering our territory that can provide service. They just need to have business partners on the ground to enable access to the satellite and distribute the service. So I understand there is also an executive order that is being proposed to try to lower the barriers for these groups to deliver internet service through satellite technology. So there are existing solutions already. If we are to build one, it is a slightly more complex project. The satellites are higher in orbit, geostationary, as opposed to our Earth orbit, as opposed to our Earth observation satellites, which are 400 kilometers up. These are 40,000 kilometers up. And so they take more substantial resources to launch. They tend to be bigger, more expensive. And it's a very specialized technology, which currently we do not yet have access to at this time. But if there is an impetus to look at this technology, which we're already doing now in the background, together with some people at the DICT, perhaps, then we can look into that, whether it makes sense for our country to invest in a sovereign satellite or lease capacity. Perhaps it's a phased approach. In the beginning, we take advantage of what's there. and then maybe citing maybe some security concerns or capacity issues that we want, then we can certainly look into building one, and PhilSA will be very willing to cooperate with relevant agencies in terms of that access.
Okay,
to
which means
technology.
that's more practical that way.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Sani.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I
Chair,
think
on the same topic lang, sisingit lang ako kung okay.
Indulgence of Senator Sani.
Yes. Yeah, for my 2 chairs. Hindi, sisingit lang ako, nabanggit ni Chair Sani, yung satellite. Whatever happened, we had some preliminary efforts in remote sensing through satellite. And we found it, at least at the very beginning in the pilot areas, very useful for agriculture and fishing, because it was very clear in the pictures where to fish and where it was useless to fish. It was also very clear where the soil had dried up. Our efforts in remote sensing through satellite still continuing. Itatanong ko lang. The other thing was that there have been suggestions for school broadcast to do it through satellite, which is relatively easy, and we wouldn't have to get involved with the internet, which is so defective. So I was going to ask, these are very practical applications that we can actually do now, exactly like Chairman Angara was saying. Ano kaya nangyari na doon? Yung remote sensing, binigay sa atin yung makina, I remember, after the Guimaras oil spill, and then yung sa DepEd naman, I remember Governor Chavit Singson was recommending na i-beam na lang direct to TV ang mga leksyon ng bata. So I was wondering, can't DOST and our Philippine Space address those very, very practical concerns?
Please.
Thank you for it. I mean, yes, Senator Marcos, thank you for that question. Yes, our efforts in remote sensing through satellites continues, and that is also precisely what we want to do. We don't want to just continue it, we want to further expand it. And the key here really is getting the information in the hands of the people who can create action out of it. I think in the past, with the efforts of the DOST, we have built infrastructure. We have capability to build these Earth observation satellites. We continue to access other countries' satellites. We have ground receiving stations. We have a modest high-performance computer hosted by the Advanced Science and Technology Institute. We want to expand all of that. So we have some of the ground infrastructure in place, but this needs to be sustained and expanded further. And this is the supporting infrastructure that allows us to do remote sensing, machine learning, and artificial intelligence on geospatial data. So that continues po, but with this, but the work ahead for PhilSA in this regard is engaging different groups in agriculture, fisheries, environment, national security, etc., possibly through the Philippine Space Council, so that we can get these tools and information in the hands of decision makers and the policy makers and those that implement programs, so their programs can be more effective because it's based on evidence which is obtained by our satellites.
But sir, the chairman of finance is already asking you what budgets for R&D need to be implemented. Kaya hingin na ninyo yan. Kasi malaking bagay yan sa mga magsasaka namin eh. Nakatulong talaga yan sa amin. Pati sa fisher folk in the overfished northern Philippine seas.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, po. Our budget po is there. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Secretary De La Peña.
I'm happy that Senator Marcos brought that up. I just would like to add that, well, first of all, the Philippine Space Council will meet for the first time on October 9. And this is actually an interagency council. But I would like to follow through with what Senator Marcos mentioned about monitoring crops, monitoring the fisheries area. And I just would like to add, for example, that as far as the environment is concerned, we have projects that uses remote sensing. For example, in the Manila Bay area, we have a mapping and monitoring activity there, which uses remote sensing. So, for example, correct me, Joel, if if I'm not accurate. But there are, for example, two satellites that pass regularly to that area. We have the Landsat of the US, we have Sentinel of the EU. I think Sentinel passes through that almost daily already. And we can monitor, for example, at least three things in the bodies of water, like the chlorophyll indicator, which will show if marine life still exists in the area, the suspended particulates indicator, and of course the turbidity indicator.
No, Secretary, because I was told sorry, Secretary, I was told that it's relatively simple.
Just a minute. Yeah. Sige.
Because you just subscribe, you pay the subscription to NASA, and you can download all this information about phytoplankton and then the adequate fishing grounds. Parang madali lang yun eh, parang quick fix. Magsusubscribe ka lang sa NASA and elsewhere, and you can access all this data that would be really critical for our hard put agricultural sector.
What was the question, Senator?
Sorry, is it correct that, as I was told previously, like Taiwan, we don't even need to embark on our own setup, but merely download locally a subscription to NASA and the other agencies that already have satellite and space setups and use this information locally?
That a correct
I think Joel can reply to that better.
We can do that. I mean, instead of putting
because
up
we
our
still
own.
need people to do the interpretation and
Ang klaro-klaro naman, sir, kasi nakita na namin yan sa MMSU sa Ilocos. It's accurate within half a meter. And it was so good for our farmers, especially our fishermen, because you can see the dark areas with phytoplankton. It was like magic for them. Instead of launching into these complicated satellite initiatives, hindi po ba pwede mag-subscribe na lang tayo sa mga existing? Bibigyan naman pala tayo ng pera ni Chair Sunny eh.
Mr. Chair, may I interject?
Chairman.
Secretary Boy, do you remember that yung sinasabi ni Sen. Aimee, ni Vice Chair Aimee sa MMSU, that was a COMSTE initiative back in 2013 or 2014. In fact, you'll remember that because you were then USEC and you were the one supporting us at the time. I was still in the House at the time, no? So tama si Vice Chair Aimee na maybe we can do the more down to the more earthy things, but at the same time keeping an eye on the ball also for the more esoteric uses. But from Director Joel's answer, it's not esoteric at all. In fact, there's a lot of spillovers. So, Mr. Chair, to save time, I would just ask for a one-pager from Director DG Joel. Maybe Vice Chair Aimee wants more information, but I would just like to know the spillovers of investing, let's say, in the full funding requirement for the Philippine satellite of 952 million. What are the spillovers? He mentioned semiconductors, etc. And my follow-up question lang there, Mr. Chair, if I may, is that a lot of times public investment, the benefit goes to private entities, no? So in this case, is there a guarantee that the intellectual property, for instance, will somehow be shared? I mean, I know it's a public good that everyone should benefit from, but it should not be private entities should not be benefited disproportionately in comparison. Dapat patas lang dun sa investment ng public at kung anin nilabas ng pribado. So yun ang concern ko going forward, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary.
Mr. Chair, can I still reply to the initial questions of Senator Angara regarding
Yes, please. So I'm actually waiting for that.
Please proceed, Secretary.
Those were the original questions.
Yeah.
So with respect to R&D, of course, we are hoping that there will be some additional amounts for our Philippine Council for Health Research and Development because there are so many things that they have to attend to at the moment. Secondly, we have a proposal under the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute, and this is really the program on nuclear medicine. As we have already expressed in media releases, there are so many people dying of cancer who do not even have the benefit of undergoing the PET scan because of the high expense, and this is what we intend to address. Now, as far as the leapfrogging is concerned, Senator Angara refers to the GNR, genomics, nanotechnology, robotics. I think the initial programs of DOST, and that was the support to the creation of the Philippine Genome Center, which is now located not only in the UP system Diliman, but also in UP Visayas and the UP Mindanao, has been doing a great job, and particularly during the this COVID-19 pandemic, it has been doing a lot of assistance, particularly even in the training of people who will run our PCR laboratories. In the case of nanotech, as we all know, this has applications in different sectors. In the new material sector, for example, researchers have led to the development of materials obtained from abaca. These are nanotech materials which have special uses. In the case of health, of course, is drug delivery. Personalized drug delivery is the target, and we have also set up now a genomic laboratory for nutrition at the Food and Nutrition Research Center. As far as robotics is concerned, I think we are addressing this through our Advanced Mechatronics, Robotics, and Industrial Automation Laboratory at the Metals Industry Research and Development Center. And this will be very, very much utilized now with the instructions of the President regarding bringing up the level of our SMEs in moving towards IR 4.0. So this particular group at MIRDC will be shielded in assisting our identified MSMEs which are ready to move towards 4.0. And I think I should also mention that we need support for the startup enterprises, because these are the kind of innovations that we need to leapfrog. Now, as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, we have an ongoing program together with the Development Academy of the Philippines and the Data Analytics Association of the Philippines for 30,000 slots for online training on data science and data analytics. And so far, we have around 50% of the 30,000 already availing. This is for data scientists, data analysts, and model builders. And we take advantage of this through the capstone projects, which we require them to do, particularly in helping LGUs, for example, and other national government agencies. We are now supporting scholars in data science at the master's level at Mapua University, and we will be supporting a few slots, particularly for government employees who would like to pursue their PhD at the Asian Institute of Management. Today, our HRD allows us to send the scholars abroad in areas where we do not have sufficient number of experts, and we do this through our scholarships and through our sandwich programs. And add to that, of course, the interest that has been generated through our Balik Scientist program, although there is still a problem on mobility, but many of them are already doing short-term services, okay, even remotely. So I think the area of leapfrogging is still high on our agenda, and these are the areas which I think have been the initial activities in these areas. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, so I don't take too much time of the committee and the department. Can I just, that was what Secretary gave is more of a tactical type of what are the baby steps to be taken. Can I get something more strategic in terms of knowing where to position ourselves and maybe where we stand and how to leverage our limited resources? No, so something with the ecosystem type of thing. I'm not in a rush here, and I realize. Yes, please. These are very busy officials, so I'll just ask for a submission on that. more strategic viewpoint, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. And the last question is my last question is about PhilVox. Given that, what is the outlook for volcanic activity, and how is the budget of PhilVox? That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, you're recognized. Yusek Sulit.
Um, with regards to volcano activity, so far we're monitoring 4 volcanoes, and these are at the abnormal level. Mayon volcano in Albay, Bulusan in Sorsogon.
Mr. Chairman, we cannot hear the session hall speaker.
Sorry. We'll adjust, Senator Coco. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, please, and kindly speak louder also. Thank you.
With regards to the monitored volcanoes, we have 4 volcanoes currently at an abnormal level. This would be Taal volcano in Batangas, Mayon volcano in Albay, Bulusan volcano in Sorsogon, and Canlaon volcano in Negros Island. So far, Taal volcano from its eruption in January has shown some trends of decreasing activity from January to March, but as of the past several weeks, this decline has not continued. We began to see some slight change in its trend from paghupa po ng pamamaga because of pressure, and nakita na namin na namamaga ulit. So we have to continuously monitor it. The Mayon volcano also is slightly again inflating from its base. So we have to watch out these 2 volcanoes. Nonetheless, at alert level 1, all the aforementioned volcanoes earlier can actually have a steam-driven explosion, meaning po, yung mga mainit na magma can actually boil up the water and cause explosion. And then people then should not go inside their danger zones. Kasama po sa Taal Volcano Island ang pagpabawal.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time. Just one more I forgot, because I read that the dam or Angat Dam is below level. What is the outlook for from Pag-asa regarding the rainfall for the remaining days of the year? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, can I also respond in behalf of Pag-asa?
Yes, please.
We are currently in La Nina warning, and so there will be a press conference sometime soon, but essentially they have mentioned that because of La Nina, there will be more rain. And so they had initially several weeks ago estimated that there will be an increasing trend of water levels in dams, but we have to closely monitor how Angat would behave.
But so far right now, Angat Dam is
Lower. Yeah.
Okay.
Pababa po.
Thank
So
you.
the rains are expected in the last quarter to early next year.
We're expecting it this
To change from lowering to increasing.
to increasing because of
Yeah.
La Nina. Thank you. Does it satisfy the
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues, and thank you to Secretary Boy and the DOST family. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Sani Angara. Next in line is Senator Nancy Binay. We also would like to remind our resource persons to please try to briefly answer the questions being raised, and of course you're allowed to explain further, but please try to be brief because we're still having some time constraints, because I know that the DOST family would need to go later on for your plenary budget deliberation in the House of Representatives. Thank you. Senator Binay, you have the floor.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Secretary Boy, and to the whole DOST family. Para kay Secretary De La Peña, magkano ho yung discontinued or unreleased appropriation for 2020? Kung meron ho.
I will ask Asek Donet.
Sige po, Asek Sahagun, you're recognized.
And siguro padagdag na din, ano yung mga tinamaan na programa?
We have 330. We're still awaiting the release of the 330 million congressional initiative, and then in terms of NDC 5, in terms of budget that were offered in compliance with NDC 580, we offered a total of 1.4 billion this year. So some of our R&D projects had to be were discontinued, or we have to work on a smaller budget for some of the R&D projects because of we have to comply with NDC 580. The total amount offered under NDC 580 under MOE amount to 1 billion, and we have 253 million for capital outlay.
And Secretary, ni-request niyo ho ba ulit to for 2021? Lalong-lalo na yung 1.4 billion na R&D na binigay niya for bayanihan?
Can you repeat it, Senator?
Kasi di ba ho, parang you gave up worth of 1.4 billion R&D budget. Kasama ho ba to sa request niyo for 2021? To, parang to bring it back?
Yes, Senator.
Kasama na, but in spite of that, medyo ang laki din ho ng binawas pa din dun sa R&D nyo. Na parang ang dating nga, hindi na-appreciate ata ng DBM ang research and development dahil makikita ho natin na yung FPRDI, ITDI, MIRDC, PNRI, and PTRI, lahat ho yan medyo substantial yung nabawas sa mga budget nila.
Yes, Your Honor. Actually, in addition doon sa nabawas, yung pong aming mga ni-request tier 2 ay ito ang sumusunod sa R&D. Yung grants in aid, our request for additional 2.111 billion was not granted. Even the request for additional budget for our three councils, 886 million for the Council for Health, 551 million for the Council for Agriculture, and 508 million for the Council on Industry and Energy were also not granted. So ito po yung mga priorities sana na madagdag doon sa aming 2021 budget.
Siguro, Secretary, can you just submit to the committee yung kumbaga wish list nyo, lalong-lalo na dito sa mga R&D institutes nyo na nabawasan ng pondo?
Yes, Your Honor. We will submit.
And then, napansin ko din ho, dun sa FIVOX, ang laki din ho nang nabawas sa budget nila. Alam naman natin na very important dahil, di ba sabi nga ho nila, nasa ring of fire tayo. In fact, we just had that Taal volcano last January. Ano ho yung magiging epekto at ano ho yung mga programa na tinamaan for FIVOX naman? Dahil nga, ang laki ho nang nabawas sa pondo nila.
Ito new stations at equipment, but you, Secretary, can probably give some of...
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
And siguro, Secretary, maganda din malaman kasi parang bakit ang laki ng binawas ng DBM dito sa FIVOX budget nyo? Ano ba yan? Dahil may hindi nyo ho na-utilize or...
Yun pong mga malaking part would be related to the equipment support, and they took away the ICT support of the monitoring system. So essentially po, as you know, many of the monitoring systems now are directly supported by IT. So even if you have sensors, these will be operated, maintained, and evaluated using IT equipment, and those were taken away. The other projects that were not funded would be on strengthening the tsunami awareness and resilience of communities, which also is crucial because of the possibility of tsunami all over the country on both sides of the...
Sir, that is part of the 133 million. Am I correct?
Na binawas, yes.
That's part of it.
Yeah, hindi na approved. Hindi na
hindi in-approve, yes. Because you offered a total of 1.4 B in compliance with NBC 580.
So,
Mr. Chair, Senator Nancy,
Yes.
Yeah. Napansin ko nga na may reduction, katulad ni Senator Binay. Napansin ko there's a reduction in the FIVEX budget. And I realized that it was IT, like you said. Parating may balita na ang FIVOX ninanakawan, tuloy-tuloy ang pagnanakaw ng equipment ninyo, taon-taon nangyayari ito sa lahat ng mga bundok. Eh kung walang IT, wala pang security, wala na nga kayong personnel, hindi ba dapat yung IT tutukan to o dagdagan ninyo ng personnel? Kasi nabawasan na kayo ng overall, IT pa, eh paano ninyo hihintuin itong continuous pilfering and stealing of FIVOX equipment?
Ayan, Yusek, medyo madami na yung nag-pile up na questions. Can you
Yes,
can you
very
answer
short
also?
lang.
That's accurate, nananakaw talaga?
Not really. There are a few. It's not so prevalent.
Not prevalent.
Typically, what they take away would be the solar panel and battery. But indeed, we have IP cameras in this station, so we can also monitor. But indeed, the IT support, ICT support in operations should not be separated from the actual sensors, and that's a real issue. Kasi ano po computer run na karamihan ng mga equipment ngayon in various aspects. But we continue to operate, we have spare, so hindi naman kami nawawala ng total lack of presence sa isang lugar.
And just to clarify, 133 billion yan, no?
Ay, hindi po.
133 million.
Million lang po yan.
Ha?
Million.
Million. And I'm just wondering, no, because you made mention there are 4 abnormal activities yung sa volcanoes natin, no? How will it affect the disapproval of your request?
It will not affect the current monitoring of those volcanoes.
The current, it will not.
Hindi naman
Kasi nakakakabay.
Hindi naman po.
Niraise nyo kanina tapos biglang wala palang pondo.
The main issue is we will slow down in terms of modernizing or putting up more stations.
The modernization will slow
We
down.
have like every year po, we add more stations for earthquake, volcano, and tsunami.
Okay, thank you, Yusek. Sige, please,
yes.
continue, Sen. Nancy.
Yusek, siguro for submission din, kung ano yung mga projects na kasama dun sa 133 million.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, Secretary Boy, di ba ho, may programa ang DOST kung saan parang meron kayong ginawang study na pwedeng kumabit dun sa, kunwari sa Globe or Smart for areas na walang signal? May ganun ho ba kayong initial program? Kasi alam naman ho natin, di ba, lalong-lalo na ngayon na online ang gagawin ng DepEd, and isa dun sa reklamo na pagdating ho dun sa mga malalayong lugar, mga bulubundukin, wala talagang signal.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chair, can I answer? So, Senator, actually isa yan sa mga instructions during the SONA to see, for example, how unused TV frequencies can be utilized, particularly in support of remote learning. And there are 3 specific actions that the DOST is taking in relation to this. One of them is the setting up of what we call community-based cellular networks in very remote places na parang yun na rin ang kanilang telco pero community-based and operated. So we are planning to set up in 10 very remote places in different countries just to show that it can be done even if the big telcos are not located in those areas.
Check, may funding ho yung 10. There's funding.
Sinasama na po namin sa aming budget ngayon. Okay.
Okay.
In the case of yun namang meron tinatawag na data casting, and maybe Dr. Marciano can help me here because he has been assisting us even if he's no longer with the OST in this respect. And the last one, of course, is the continuing development of learning modules, which we have started almost 8 years ago. It's mga computerized modules. Wala pa sa guni-guni namin itong mangyayari na ito, but dinevelop na itong mga computer learning modules. Grade 1 to 8 for mathematics, and we started with grade 8 for science. So we continue to do the development. So maybe very quickly, Director General Joel can say something about the data casting, which we hope to work together with PTV4.
Thank you.
Okay, please proceed.
Yes,
DG.
so yung pong rural connectivity that can be provided through non-conventional means, ang nabanggit po ni Secretary de la Peña, is we can build and put up a new model for delivering service in these spaces which are neglected. Yung mga community networks po, so if they can be empowered to provide service in their respective areas, until as a bridging solution until the telcos come in and finds the area more profitable, and then perhaps that they can sustain that connectivity. Meron pong technology that exists. We started that po in DOST ASTI, and moving forward, when I move to PhilSA po, we have pledged our cooperation with DOST ASTI and DOST Fisher to continue interfacing and working together there po. Because I think also satellites can provide an additional overlay. Our small satellites can provide basic communications that can support that ground infrastructure. Yung mga cellular-based, not cellular, community networks po use mga open source technology to build relatively simple, not so complex infrastructure like LTE that can provide connectivity in those areas. Now, isa rin pong approach na pwede natin gamitin is we can accelerate the rollout of digital TV because digital TV has additional features. It can also possibly enable some interaction wherein the viewer can send back very simple messages, and that in that way they're interacting with the content. So it's better than just passively watching the content, audio and video. So that is something that in my current capacity as PhilSA will continue interfacing with the DOST as appropriate and working on those projects.
We have sufficient budget for that for next year.
You have sufficient budget now for next year.
For those type of projects.
Community-based cellular networks na we plan to put up 10 of these in very remote areas, ay nag-set aside na po kami ng budget. Pero doon sa mga data casting na binabanggit, ang inaasahan hopefully namin kung yung PTV4 ang kapartner ay sana ay sila naman din ang magbigay ng resources.
Secretary, siguro magkano ho ba ang kakailanganin for that data casting?
May I po?
Please give us a ballpark figure.
I think yung data casting as pwede po yan kasing i-upgrade yung mga existing TV broadcast stations natin with that additional capability. I think ang ballpark figure po is an additional per station, if I'm not mistaken, order po siguro mga between 15 M above, no, to enable that feature. But of course, that's just an add-on to the existing capability of a station. But what we want is also to roll out the infrastructure in other places. Then the costs will be additional. No, if you want to put up this TV station, digital TV station in other places. So there's you have to put up the towers as well and the equipment po. So I think ang PTV4 also with our prior consultation has some plans about that, and ang input lang po namin doon is kung magtatayo ng panibagong mga digital TV infrastructure, isama na po yung feature ng data casting. That's our input. So may additional po na parang module yun. It's a ballpark siguro po mga 15 million pa above as an add-on. Okay?
So, DG Marciano, pwedeng ano na lang, kumbaga, ikarga sa budget ng PTV4 more than your agency?
Well, actually po sila po talaga yung may ano doon, ang may infrastructure doon, yung mga TV stations natin. Tama po yun. Now, in the case of PhilSA po, we are looking into this technology also as putting it into our small satellites. No, ito pong mga ginagawa nating mga CubeSats and SmallSats. Also, there is a TV standard that applies also to this, and we can apply to satellites, and we can use data casting on these small satellites as well.
And DG Joel, di ba meron na naman tayong CubeSats na may ganyang capability?
Not yet this capability, Senator. What we have is a capability for our small satellites to take signals from the ground, from sensors, distributed in possibly remote places that are hard to reach. For example, we're tracking the habitat of, let's say, the Philippine eagle or other endangered species, and then they carry these radios, no? And then we can sense them through satellites, and then we can store them on our satellites. Pagdating over Metro Manila, for example, then we can download that data. So it's a semblance of connectivity. It's called store and forward. And we can also apply that to supplement yung mga remote infrastructure that we have with trickles of data through these constellation of satellites. So that's also quite possible for, and we are looking into that. And we are hoping that with an operational budget for next year, we can incorporate this into our satellite mission.
Mr. Chair, I just asked Director General Joel, you said 15 million per station, but to have an impact, mga ilang stations dapat ang idagdag?
I would say po to that is nationwide coverage. So I guess I think ang number of stations po yata is roughly a handful, no, maybe over 10 locations on PTV4, if I'm not mistaken, that they might have plans. I cannot really speak for them po, but we need to have nationwide coverage. And as archipelago, I think it becomes a bit more challenging to cover that. So I think we can look at the NTC database and see where the stations already are, and see whether these other areas are not being reached by these signals. So then that can be areas where we can deploy. Ang kagandahan po kasi siguro sa TV station is that in one hop, we can get information from point A to point B. We just have to concentrate the content doon sa station itself, somehow accumulate the content. We can cache it there, store it there, and then in one hop, it gets to the destination. It's not the same as the internet. Nothing ever will be. But it's a good bridging solution, and the fact that this technology has these additional features which we might be forgetting about, I think it's a good time to really take advantage of this and accelerate the rollout of the infrastructure. What siguro po one per region, if as a ballpark figure, I really have to look at the further study on that.
Okay. Yeah. Secretary De La Peña, do you think sufficient na ho yung 10 na initial community-based telcos, no?
Yung ipinasok na po namin sa aming budget yung 10 community-based cellular networks in remote areas.
But if kung makakala po tayo ng funding, would you want more?
Siyempre po, kasi marami tayong tinatawag na GIDA, yung mga
growth
disadvantaged areas.
Siguro, Secretary, can you just submit yung 10 na nasama niyo na sa budget nyo? And then, yung
wish
list nyo kung saan pa kayo kung saan nyo pa gustong magdagdag.
Isasabit na lang po namin. Oo.
Yes. Siguro, balikan na lang natin. Thank you, Secretary. Dun for the Space Agency.
Yes. DG Joel.
Yes, DG Joel. More compared to our ASEAN neighbors, where are we in terms of number of satellites?
Okay, thank you for that question, Senator. Yes, we have launched 3 small satellites. It's a major accomplishment in terms of the amount of time that we have been able to accomplish that. So we are in everybody's radar. Our partners in Japan have recognized this milestone and accomplishments. We are in a good spot because of the momentum, and more importantly, because of the people that we have been able to train and retain in country. So while I mentioned earlier that PhilSci is building from the ground up and not starting from scratch, I'm afraid that what will make us start from scratch is when we lose these people through the brain drain. So I think because of the talent and the hard work that we have on these people, young engineers and scientists, we are in a good spot po. So then the satellites will catch up. I think, but as long as we have the manpower and the capability and infrastructure and the resources to challenge them and to continue building not just the satellites but the spillover effect po na sinabi ni Senator Angara kanina, some of them will go to industry, some of them will go to government, etc. So I think we are in a good spot right now in terms of our what we are poised to accomplish further po.
Diba, if we have 3, so like Indonesia, ilan ang satellite nila? Or Thailand, Malaysia?
Well, ang Indonesia po currently is able to, when we talk about Earth observation satellites, their space agency has a capability to deploy a satellite or has a plan to deploy a satellite approximately every 3 years. So they do have 3 or 4 orbiting satellites already, and then not to mention yung mga telecom satellites that they have access to, and some of which they own themselves. No, so ibang klaseng satellites po yun, ibang category yun, yung mga telecom satellites, supposed the Earth observation satellites that we're currently building. In their LAPAN, in their space agency, they have a plan that every 3 years they deploy a satellite, and that's been seen over the past few years consistently. So we are around 3. Later this year, we hope to deploy 1 more CubeSat. Next year, and these are programs for the DOST. Next year, we hope to deploy 2 of our CubeSats that are built in Philippine universities. Ito po yung Maya series, no, nagawa na po ng mga local scholars natin. So that will bring our total to 6. And in international space reports, we are now included in the roster of countries which are being acknowledged as having several government small satellites po. So I think we are in a good spot by comparison. And also in terms of the space agency that we have established, and ang kailangan na lang po talaga is resources to keep the momentum and to build on top to use these accomplishments to springboard po.
Katulad nga ng suggestion ni Sen Aimee kanina, di ba? Bakit hindi na lang mag-subscribe dun sa existing satellite, for example, sa NASA? What would be the advantage or disadvantage of doing that compared to investing sa sarili nating satellites?
Okay, thank you po for that question. I was hoping to get back to that earlier thread po. Yes, we have, well, precisely yung pong nabanggit kanina ni Senator Aimee Marcos regarding the fishermen getting access to the information. I believe it was Dr. Comiso, one of the scientists from NASA, who visited the Ilocos region sometime in the past as part of COMSTEREN, as a balik scientist as well, to brief her on that program. And that is precisely the kind of end-to-end value chain that we want in our country in terms of getting access to space data, translating it into information and actionable insights, and bridging it to the people that can use it. There are many more verticals like this, not just for fishermen. If we count the number of different crops that we have in our country, we want to have this value chain in place for every single agricultural product that we have, for the industries and the infrastructure that we need to monitor. So marami po tayong pwedeng puntahan, and there is value in being part of every step of this value chain. That means also being able to not just access other countries' satellites, but building our own, because there are spillover effects in terms of building an industry. Our semiconductor and electronics is still a breadwinner for the country in terms of exports. So we need to give them diversify their products, make them build more difficult products that can compete in the global market, and take a share of the 40,000 satellites that Elon Musk is planning to build and maintain for internet connectivity. So there's an emerging market for it, and we hope to enable that as well. So that's part of being embedded in every step of the value chain.
Senator Nancy, Chair Joel, ipipida ko lang kasi nabanggit nila si Dr. Joey Comiso. He's a scientist in NASA who did all the preliminary studies for the polar cap melting of the Al Gore books and all that stuff. There are actually 12 resident scientists who are Ilocano, Filipino in NASA. So we're very, very proud of them, and they always provide us with data, but they're completely puzzled by our failure to access all this free satellite information. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Aimee.
So, di Joel, parang may job generation component din pala yung satellite build-up natin.
Tama po yan, Senator. Yes, it is about building a knowledge workforce. It's about learning how to build more difficult products in our country, which requires highly skilled workforce and a more robust economy in terms of our outputs and the complex outputs of our country. So yes, tama po yun.
Okay.
Don't forget that particular data that Senator Angara is asking from you. Kasi siya yung chair ng finance eh.
Ayun na nga, chair eh. I-remind ko lang kay D. Joel, yung I would also ask the same wish list para mapagtulungan natin kung paano natin matutulungan itong space agency. Nakakalungkot kasi 'di ba, when we pass this agency, dapat may kasama tong 1 billion na initial funding. But kung may problema tayo sa IRR, may problema din tayo pagdating sa funding. Marami tayong pinapasa na madalas unfunded, and kabilang na nga itong space agency. Siguro, Mr. Chair, last question na lang for Secretary De La Peña. Can we just get an update dun sa local kit that was developed? Kasi nung, I think, budget hearing ng DBM, parang hindi ho ata natutuloy yung procurement ng DOH for the locally manufactured PCR kits.
Opo.
Kasi parang nagka-problema daw ho, parang bumalik ata ulit dun sa...
Mr. Chair, nagkaroon po ng contamination noong unang bahagi, yung in-import na kanilang components, but actually hindi lang naman Pilipinas ang naapektuhan noon, ang dami nag-import from that country. So nagpalit lang ng source, and we were able to replace all of those. And so the commitment of our project, which was part of that development of 26,000 tests, has already been met. And the technology-based company that was put up, the Manila Health Tech Corporation, has already been receiving so much orders, even from the private sector, from LGUs, and they have already increased their capacity to produce, from the original rate, which I think was only at 3,000 tests per day, to 8,000 tests per day. So it seems that it is an ongoing business already. So far, we have not received any problem or complaint from the startup company, and they are looking forward to plans to expand to cover other products. And if I may just go back to the questions of Senator Nancy with respect to this community-based cellular networks and to data casting, according to our Executive Director of the Philippine PSHERD, or Philippine Council for Industry, Energy, and Emerging Technologies Development, the 10 that we have planned for the community-based cellular network will hopefully cover the remaining 12% na according to DepEd ay hindi walang access to connectivity. Then as far as the data casting that was mentioned is concerned, according to our PSHERD, our desired number would be 10, okay, and we are already covering 2 from our existing funds, and we have got an indication from PTV4 that they probably support 4 remote relay stations. So maybe an additional 4 so that we can deliver the 10 that we have planned for this forthcoming year. 15 million per station.
Thank you, Secretary De La Peña. And reminder lang ho yung submission nyo ng wish list nyo for the yung R&D institutes na nabawasan ng pondo. And rest assured ho, together with our chair, Joel Villanueva, and our finance chair, Sunny Angare, talagang hahanapan ho namin ng pondo dahil alam ho namin na kung gaano kahalaga ang research and development sa ating bansa. Muli, maraming salamat po, Secretary De La Peña and
just a final word for Senator Angara. And I just wanted to assure Senator Angara na yung po mga pinlano namin ng delayed Senator Angara during the Comstead days ay nangyayari na. And the fact that in the GII, the Global Innovation Index, the fact that we ranked number 25 actually in terms of science and engineering graduates out of the 131 is an indication of a very positive development. Thank you very much.
Chair, dadagdag ko lang. Siguro ho, Secretary Boy, napansin ng DBM kahit maliit yung binibigay sa inyong budget, umaangat naman kayo. Kaya siguro hindi nila nakita na kailangan nyo pa ng additional budget.
Thank you very much, Senator Nancy, especially for your support to this agencies of the government, itong PhilSA and DOST. Next in line is Senator Bongo. Senator Bong, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wala lang po akong tanong. I express my support for the budget of the Department of Science and Technology and Philippine Space Agency. Na-confirm na ba yung Mr. Chair, na-confirm na ba natin si yung sa Philippine Space Agency?
I think, Your Honor, I think the consensus is that he doesn't need to undergo.
Correct.
If I'm correct.
I was the one who pointed that out, Chairman Joel. During the CA, I pointed that out. Yeah, no need to confirm the head of the PSA.
Yes, and we submit to the wisdom of our number one bar top notcher here in the Senate.
Also a BS Mathematics graduate, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Coco.
Papunta ka na ba sa ibang space, Senator Coco?
Pwede na daw sa Mars eh.
Anyway, especially LODA department led by its very hardworking Secretary Fortunato de la Peña in striving to continuously improve our efforts in research and development and science and technology. With your efforts, together with the rest of the government, we will overcome this crisis. I would like to congratulate the DOST because the Philippines rose from rank 100 in 2014 to rank 50th in the Global Innovation Index 2020. A symbol of hope for the country that is currently fighting the pandemic. Indeed, hard work and constant pursuit of excellence do pay off, but let us not be complacent. We can still improve, and we should, and we are here in the legislative branch is behind you to do our part to help. I also implore the DOST as the lead agency in charge of clinical trials for the COVID-19 vaccine in Metro Manila, Calabarzon, and Cebu to ensure that the vaccine trials are expedited but still in accordance with applicable scientific standards. Please make sure that the vaccine is safe. Yun lang po ang importante para po hindi matakot ang ating mga kababayan. Siguraduhin natin na safe yung vaccine na inyong nasa trial stages po sa ngayon. I also take this opportunity to express my excitement over the country's first real push into becoming a space capable and space faring nation within the next decade, as embodied in the Philippines Space Act. Every great nation has the goal of seizing the space frontier, and I am happy to see the country take its first steps toward the realization of this lofty goal. Kumusta na po yung clinical trial natin, Secretary Boy de la Peña?
So far po, thank you, Senator, for the support. We have already signed 6 confidentiality disclosure agreements involving 5 countries. And so far, I think Russia has already submitted all the data that have been requested by our vaccine expert panel, and our panel has already sent their reaction and request for additional data. The other one, which will probably send the next batch of data, we expect the Janssen vaccine developed by Johnson & Johnson in the US to send the data that are being required from them. So all of these are needed so that our sub-KWG on vaccine development can do the endorsement to the FDA to give the final say. We are also awaiting, Senator, the release of the vaccines that will be included in the WHO vaccine solidarity trials. They said that by the start of October, they will release the list of vaccines that will be included. And we have already at the DOST set aside the needed funding for the clinical trials for these WHO vaccines. We have set aside a total of 89.1 million pesos to cover the zones that you have indicated, five in Manila, one in Calabarzon, one in Cebu, and one in Davao. In the case of the so-called independent trials outside of the WHO solidarity trials, we are requiring the vaccine developer to finance the clinical trials in the Philippines. Thank you, Senator.
Lumalabas na mga nababalitaan po ako na meron ang lumalabas na mga vaccines, no? Ayaw ko na po pangalanan anong bansa, pero dumaan ba ito sa inyo at ano pong komento nyo tungkol dito?
So far po, wala nung mga ganon. Kasi ang una dapat na makakaalam ay ang FDA kung merong pumasok na bakuna o dito o hindi. Sa amin kasi yung pong mga kausap lang namin, as other than the WHO, are those countries which we either approach because we have bilateral agreements with them on science and technology, and the others which actually approach us because of the intention to do trials here eventually for marketing purposes.
Maraming salamat, Secretary Boy. Full support po ako sa inyo, Department of Science and Technology at sa Philippine Space Agency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bongo, and especially for your support in this with the both agencies, PhilSA and the DOST. This juncture will proceed by acknowledging and giving the floor to Senator Coco Pimentel. Senator Coco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Also, working lunch na lang ulit tayo. Parating magandang timing ko, parating opening line ko yan eh. Working lunch na lang lahat tayo. So, si Secretary nasa session hall, no?
Yes, Senator. Si Secretary Peña and DG Joel Marciano.
Sige. Secretary, can you tell me more about yung Global Innovation Index? Inspire us more kasi para ako first time ko narinig yan eh. So what is that? Who conducts that? And then what has happened?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your permission. The Global Innovation Index has been in operation for more than a decade now, and it is actually being implemented or operated by three institutions led by the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, together with INSEAD of France and also the University of the US. They have around 80 different indicators that they use in doing the Global Innovation Index. They categorize this into the so-called input innovations and the output innovations. The input innovations, of course, are those which require resources, like how much we spend for education, how much we spend for R&D, and other inputs. On the output side, they measure certain output indicators like the knowledge generation, the knowledge absorption, the technology-based products that are being exported. That would also include our ranking in terms of the export services for knowledge types of businesses. And in the case of the output innovations, this year we ranked, I think that was number 41. And for the input innovations, we were ranked 70 all in all. So overall, our ranking is now 50 out of 131 countries or economies. They summarized the highlights of the report of the three agencies led by WIPO is really encouraging. First, they said that our rise to 50th rank out of 131 is remarkable in the sense that if you go back to 2014, we were number 100. Secondly, we are one of four economies or countries that were identified as having the best improvement in GII. The four countries are China, India, Vietnam, and the Philippines. As far as the low middle income countries, there are 29 of them. We were ranked number 4 in terms of the GII. And I think it is very interesting to note also their remarks that the Philippines which has actually recently passed two acts, a Philippine Innovation Act and the Innovative Startup Act, actually demonstrates, shall we say, the national policy of putting importance in innovation in the overall program or plan of government. And so we were also invited, and it was an honor for the Philippines. The book on the Global Innovation Index 2020 that they released featured 16 chapters. The first 7 chapters were written by academics, okay, and people who were experts in terms of innovation. And the other chapters from I think from 8 to 15 were written by representatives from different continents and or geographical areas. The Philippines, and specifically, I was invited to write Chapter 8 in behalf of the Southeast Asia and Oceania. So that was already, I think, also a recognition of our
Thank you.
our
With the
Secretary.
indulgence of Senator Coco, with the indulgence of Senator Coco, let me just acknowledge the presence, who is physically present right now. Senator Ping Lacson is also Vice Chair of the Committee on Finance. Sir, good afternoon.
Thank you. I just came from the PIDEA DDB, so I presided over the budget.
The, the Senator Lacson want to go ahead. I believe. Okay.
We will send you, Senator, the details of.
Okay, Secretary, question. Can I continue, Chairman Joel?
Yes,
Chairman,
yes, you
okay.
may, Senator Coco.
Secretary, I hope available naman yan sa online, yung study para yung details we can just check online. You mentioned we were number 4 sa middle income countries. Which countries were ranked ahead of us? Para lang makita natin ang situation.
Hindi ko po
Hindi mo alam. Okay. Tapos, binanggit niyo po yung mga startups, mga innovation, innovative companies. Kaya nga kagabi, nag-hint ako during the interpellation on CREATE, nag-hint ako na I think we should make equity-based compensation tax-free as much as possible because I think this kind of compensating employees by startups or high-tech companies, it goes hand in hand with the startup company. So yun po yung logic or rationale behind what one amendment which I will be proposing to create yung create law, to create bill. Ngayon Mr. Secretary, kumusta po yung ating science scholarship programs? Malakas pa ba ito? Marami pa bang nag-a-avail? Itong question ko, yung mga nagpapatakbo ba ng DOST ngayon at saka yung mga attached agencies natin, which are of course heavily scientific, are they coming from or are they products of
Yes,
past science scholarship programs?
if I may be allowed, to my left and to my right are former DOST scholars. Dr. Joel, you were a Director General of the Philippine Space Agency, is a DOST scholar. Assistant Secretary Maridon Sahagun was a DOST scholar. And I think we can cite a long list of our officials. Undersecretary Rowena Guevara is a scholar from high school up to PhD. We have Yusek Brenda Manzano, who is a DOST scholar in her undergraduate, and the directors of the Metals Industry Research and Development Center,
Good.
and the director of the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. They have been scholars of DOST, and the leading luminaries in the country's leading universities in science and technology are now run by former DOST scholars. If we will look at the figures from 2019, 2020, 2021, the number of scholars have risen from 40,000 plus to 44, and we expect around 50,000 in the coming year. And I think this is one area where DBM has been quite supportive. They have been continuously adding budget to the scholarships consistently. And we are really doing our best so that our scholars, okay, will not only graduate successfully, but also be able to contribute to needs of the country. We give them a 1 week immersion program. We call it the Patriot program because they have to understand that they are not just fortunate to be DOST scholars, but they have a responsibility when they graduate.
Wait, nowadays, when you are a DOST scholar, what do you get? What are you entitled to? And what course or courses should you take?
Yes, Your Honor. The OST undergraduate scholars receive a monthly support of 7,000 pesos a month. That is for the 10 months that they are in school. If their curriculum requires them to take courses in summer, we also support them. Uh, they also get, of course, the tuition fee, except that if they are scholars in the exclusive schools, they have a limit only. What the universities do, if they have DOST scholars, usually they add on to the support so that the tuition fee can be handled. Now, we also give them, of course, the allowances for books, for transportation, in case they are coming from a different region, going to the university where they will be attending. Our MS and PhD have better, shall we say, privileges. Our master's program gives an allowance of 25,000 a month. The PhDs receive 33,000 per month. And we now already opened again our scholarship for sending scholars abroad in fields where we have a very small number of experts. There are certain areas where the old-timer experts have already gone past the retirement age, and there are no new replacements. So we have to send some of them abroad. And we also have a sandwich program which enables our scholars studying here to do their thesis and dissertation work abroad.
Because kami ni Dr. Arcilia of the nuclear research, did I get
Senator
the...
Coco, if I may, Senator Coco, with your indulgence, with regard to scholarship, can I just
Yes, continue,
get
please.
one question? Secretary, in our record, it says here we have our plan is to sponsor a total of 43,334 higher education scholars, or an additional scholar of 8,243 compared last year. But ideally, what we wanted to accomplish is to produce the likes of DG Joel and ASEC Sahagun, no? That's the ideal goal. But to date, how many researchers, scientists, and engineers are engaged in research in the country today? At ilan yung ideal? Kasi I'm sure yun yung isa sa mga goals natin yung scholars natin ma-engage. And perhaps the next question would be, in the past, is SEI or itong mga Science Education Institute able to efficiently trace how many of the SEI scholars eventually engage themselves in research?
Opo. Actually, yung ating mga scholars nga ay nami-meet naman natin yung ating target na increase so far. The number that the average number of researchers per country according to UNESCO is now at 380 per million. We are, I think,
380 researchers, scientists and
380
engineers
research per
per
million
1 million
per 1
population.
million population.
That's
And
the
I
ratio.
think our
Opo.
figures now is around 280, 100 lower than that. But we anticipate that actually in terms of supply, we will meet the numbers required. The problem is the availability of employment in those positions, in research positions. Because number one, very difficult to create new plantilla positions for researchers in the government. It is also very difficult to create new faculty positions or researcher positions in the SUCs. And if we talk about the private sector, many of the companies, including those that are multinationals in the country, very few of them are really doing their R&D in the Philippines. And that's the reason why we also have a program of encouraging our local companies to do R&D by way of facilitating the build-up of their facilities.
Please, Senator Lacson, with the indulgence, Senator Coco.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. With the permission of Senator Pimentel also. Actually, naunahan niyo po ako sa tanong ko, I would have asked the same question, exactly the same question, yung inventory ng mga scientists and scholars. Now, my point is, what good are these scholars, scientists, kung walang support mechanism? Meaning, yung R&D facilities, kung kulang, limitado yung kanilang magiging kapasidad, hindi ba? So, since your R&D budget for 2021 is 7 billion plus, so 7.019, representing 29.379% ng inyong budget. Ang tanong ko po is this enough to support yung R&D program ninyo sa department?
Thank you, Your Honor. Actually po, hindi nga po enough. And
So how much do you need? Actually.
Well, actually, ang tinanong sa amin po earlier, kung alin doon sa mga ipinropose namin doon sa tinatawag na Tier 2 na hindi naman na-approvean ang aming priority. And I enumerated that in the case of our grants in aid for multidisciplinary
Bigyan nyo lang po kami ng top 3 priorities at magkano.
yung top 3 ko po ay yung R&D budget for grants in aid at 2.112 billion. And the other one po is actually the regional programs. They are not all R&D, but they are actually involving the upgrading of technological capabilities of our productive sectors in the regions at 1.222 billion. These are the regional programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just pursue this further during my time.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. Senator Coco, please proceed.
Yes. Anyway, Senator Binay requested a wish list, no, from the secretary and from the department. So, if you feel, Secretary, you need to enhance the current science scholarship program, paki-indicate na lang doon sa wish list. And of course, I will fully support the science scholarship program being one of your scholars, no? A product of the program.
Yeah. With your permission, Mr. Chair, meron pong isang component yung program sa scholarships na actually ginagawa namin ngayon as an innovation. And this is appointing them as research fellows after their PhDs kung wala silang mapuntahan na magka-hire sa kanila. And this can be done up to a maximum of 5 years. We call them the Career Incentive Program. And then we assign them to government institutions that are in need of these PhDs and even MS graduates, particularly for R&D. We have a very few slots pa lang po dahil that is limited by our budget. But if we had our if it can be granted, we want to increase this number of the so-called career incentive program fellows so that they can add up to the research human resource requirements of the other institutions, including the SUCs.
Ito na last few questions na lang. Secretary, yung ibang bansa meron silang mga ratio na sinusunod for a sound economy or for sound planning daw, may mga debt to GDP ratio, may mga deficit to GDP ratio. Meron bang, are you aware of a research and development to GDP ratio na so-called, which some economists or planners call as the ideal ratio? Meron po ba ganong, Secretary? At if aware kayo sa ganyan, what is it and what is our R&D expense to GDP or to budget ratio? O depende po yun sa what is that ideal rule that you have encountered?
Meron pong indicator other than the number of researchers per million population, which is one of the indicators. The other classical indicator is the GERD, and this is the gross expenditures as a percentage for R&D as a percentage of GDP. And well, frankly, ayoko na pong tingnan yung ratio na yon kasi the ideal the average, as indicated by UNESCO, is 1%, and we are still at the 0.15%. Tumataas din po kung minsan yung ating numerator, pero mas mabilis tumaas yung denominator. Anyway, kaya po ako tinitingnan ko na yung ibang measurements kamukha ng Global Innovation Index kasi parang nagkakaroon ako ng pag-asa doon. Pero kung yung pong GERD,
pag kami kausap nyo, pag legislators ang kausap nyo during the budget time, yan ang i-raise natin, that there is such an indicator being used by planners and policymakers in other countries called the GRD. Pero gross expenditure on research and development, kasama siguro private and public yan, sir?
As a percentage of GDP.
Okay, so that means that we have no idea dun sa private sector.
We are surveying that regularly.
Are they reporting to you? What your department? What are the?
No, what is the percentage who actually report?
But you monitor, Mr. Secretary, di ba?
We do. We have a unit which is monitoring that, both private and public.
Okay, pero siguro we can, sige, pag-isipan na lang namin ng staff ko how we can make that stricter monitoring, lalo na sa private sector. Ano naman to, reporting lang naman eh. Let's make the reporting mandatory. Ano naman masama doon, di ba? So,
hindi naman po yung reporting ng private sector kasi naka-rise
okay.
sa Census of Business Establishments. So, we give additional funding to the Statistics Agency just to include that question in the business survey. Pero yung post-government agencies, we do a direct survey. DOST surveyors doing that.
Sa government, meron na tayong classification, di ba? Code. So dapat siguro sa code lang huli na natin what is R&D.
Pagpasensyahan nyo na po ako kasi 1982 pa involved na ako diyan sa mga ratio na yan.
So gamitin nyo, sir, sa amin. Pagdating sa budget,
wala po.
Secretary, pagdating sa budget planning, gamitin natin yung GRD. So ang sagot mo sa akin, ang GRD natin 0.15%, tama? And then
Opo. The
Oh,
average
again, 0.
1.
Ah,
According to
oh,
UNESCO, the ideal is 1%, but what we are
1.
having right now is 0.015%.
Hindi po,
Your Honor.
0.15.
Okay.
0.15.
Point,
Oo.
Yes, thank you.
0.15. 0.15 is 0.15. Parehas yun. Okay. So we are more or less 1/6 or 1/7 of the ideal. Tama ba yun, Secretary?
Opo.
Tama pa ba mathematics ko? So,
The
meaning,
ratio of our budget to total budget is 0.4%.
sa budget yon, budget. Wag tayo malito kasi sabi mo yung ideal is 1% of GDP.
Yes.
Tama? And then, okay, and then using your budgetary figure, you're now at 0.15% of GDP.
Hindi po budgetary figure yun. That is the result of the survey.
Yes, yeah, the gross nga pala with private sector. So, okay, so we have to, we cannot force the private sector to spend more unless by law. So, tignan na lang natin yung, so dalawa pala yon, dalawa. So, private plus public sector. So, doon natin i-increase yung public sector. So, paglaruan na lang natin kung anong formula. So, kasi parang ang gusto mo sabihin, you can appeal to us to multiply times what yung budgetary support for R&D sa government to bring up that percentage closer to 1%. Tapos siguro by law we can just give incentives for private companies to increase their R&D. Siguro sa tax system yan ba? Yung sa create yata, binigyan ng enhanced deduction yun eh. So for every peso you can claim more than 1 peso. So mga ganong technique siguro to improve our R&D expenditure. So anyway, thank you for that input, Mr. Secretary. Sa one question na lang, sa Chair Joel, sa Nuclear Research Institute, which is an attached agency. Not on your budget, sir, but just a question on the Philippine policy for nuclear power generation. Where should this come from? Where should the seed idea or the initial proposal come from? From the PNRI or from the DOE?
Actually, yung policy, I recommend yan ang DOE with respect to the utilization of nuclear energy. I would like to request Undersecretary Rowena Guevara, who has now been designated as the Vice Chair, okay, of the Interagency Committee for the Nuclear Energy Program. So she is, I think, connected virtually. If she can update us on what has happened since it was created last August.
Okay, yes, she's here with us, Yusek Rowena Guevara for Research and Development. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a EO 116 that created the Nuclear Energy Power Interagency Committee. In that NEPIAC, in our last discussion, we have covered the 19 infrastructure requirements of the IAEA for a country to pursue nuclear power. And we are now in the stage where we are putting up the subcommittees that will address each and every one of these 19 requirements. And our hope is to submit a report by December on how the Philippines can approach all of this, complying with all of this. In some areas, we are already ahead, but in some areas, we have a lot to go. And our imagination is that the requirements can be complied with, and if the government would like to pursue nuclear power, we can do so. Thank you, sir.
Well, anyway, Chairman, question lang yun, hindi endorsement of nuclear power product generation yun. Ano? So anyway, Mr. Chairman, marami pa yata magtatanong. So thank you for the time given to me. Thank you, Secretary, and to all of the DOST family. Salamat po.
Si Yusek Guevara po, DOST scholar din yun.
DOST scholar daw, si Yusek Guevara. Thank you, Senator Coco. Let's proceed now with Senator Ping Lacson. Sir, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ako, I have always advocated for R&D. No? In fact, over the years, no, from 2017 to 2020, kinukwenta ko po, yung institutional amendments ko to support R&D, umabot na siya ng 3.6 billion. While hindi na consider ito in its entirety, not only for the OST. No? In fact, last year, for this year, for the current fiscal year, nagpa-augment uli ako ng 250 million pesos. Now, I'd like to find out, nasama ba ito sa 4-letter release with the passage of the Bayanihan Act? Kasi karamihan ng mga congressional initiative, withhold o kaya ni-realign to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I'd like to find out, yung 250 million, review lang ito, which I augmented during last year's deliberation for the 2020 budget kung tinamaan ng COVID.
Sasagot po si Asek Sahagun.
Asek Sahagun, you recognize?
Sir, lahat po ng aming congressional initiatives ay hindi pa nare-release.
Kaya nga, ibig sabihin, for later release, which won't be released anymore.
Yes, sir.
The reason why I have always advocated for, maski nung previous administrations pa, I have always advocated for supporting R&D. Kasi I think it's time that we stop shopping and started selling. Di po ba? And with the number of scholars that you have and the number of scientists, yung mga local, yung homegrown talents natin, sinasayang natin without the proper support mechanism. Kasi magiging limitado, no matter how many scientists we have, kung wala naman yung component, yung technical support, wala rin. Aalis lang. Pupunta lang sa ibang bansa. Now, tinanong ko na sa inyo kanina yung 7 billion kasi ang total share para sa R&D in the entire bureaucracy sa executive department, 0.5%. Nag-improve na. Kasi previous years, 0.38, 0.4, now it's 0.5%. And for a more simple mental computation, kasi pag iniquit natin sa GDP, medyo nagko-compute pa tayo, kaya ang computation ko lang to make it easier for me, percentage of the budget. So sa 4.56 trillion budget, 0.5% ngayon, which is kung...
Please use your microphone, sir.
2.3 billion.
2.3, almost 2.4 against 4.5 trillion.
Ito kumpara sa 4.5. Pero ito yung integrated na.
Opo.
Lahat na. 2.3 lang, baka 23 billion. Kasi sa DOST lang, 7 billion.
23 billion po. 23
billion. Yun. Tama. To be exact, 22.5. Kasi kung 4.56, 4.5 na lang, kung 10%, that's 450 billion. Kung 5%, that's 225 billion. Kung 0.5, 22.5 or 23, tama. So, is there a way para ma-integrate na lang natin lahat ng research and development efforts, yung programs ng government, under a multi-agency approach to be shepherded by DOST para integrated, hindi sabog-sabog. Kasi nangyayari, bibigyan natin ang budget ng R&D, halimbawa, AFP, PNP. Kaya po, galing ako sa PNP, nag-PNP ako. Alam niyo yung Research and Development Branch or Directorate? Walang ginawa, araw-araw kundi mag-Google, naghahanap na mabibili. And that's not research and development. So why don't we, redirect our efforts to sa program in support of a holistic program, Kung meron tayong 22 or 23 billion pesos, representing 0.5%, at ito'y ma-integrate natin under a multi-agency approach. Yung lahat ng agencies involved, but integrated under an umbrella, under the umbrella of the DOST, di ba mas maganda yon para may direksyon, hindi kanya-kanya? Your thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator, Your Honor, ito po ay sinubukan na sa nag-umpisa muna sa Department of Health. Kaya nagpasa po ng batas yung National Unified Health Research Agenda. Batas po 'yon na kung saan sinasabi doon na 4 na ahensya ng gobyerno ang magdedetermine kung ano yung mga research and development projects na gagawin, na susuportahan. Ang 4 pong ahensya ay ang DOST, ang DOH, ang National Institutes of Health na UP at ang CHED. At yan po ay maayos na tumatakbo. So ibig sabihin, kailangan nagkakaintindihan doon sa mga projects. It has come to a point na ginagawa ko pong modelo ang DOH kasi ang DOH pinapabahala na sa amin yung kanilang research money, because there is a law. Ngayon, hindi pa po yan, wala pa pong katulad sa ibang ahensya. Although this time, since the different government agencies are members of our governing councils in the different councils, halimbawa agriculture, member nun ng DA, dun sa health research, member ng DOH, dun naman sa industry and energy, kasama ang DOH, ang DOE, ang DO Transportation, at saka ang Public Works. Ang isa pong nakikita namin ngayon, even without a law, na medyo nagre-respond ng maigi, ang DPWH na nag-aano na talaga, na tawag dito, naglalagay na pala talaga ng pera for research at ika nga na nakakatugma na yung aming mga ginagawang research.
Pero di po ba the more logical and practical agency to lead? DOST. Kasi kung DOH, diyan naka-impact yung effort sa research and development, medyo limitado yata yung kanilang coverage of jurisdiction-wise. Kasi kung ibang efforts naman, say, security sector naman, yung R&D ng Armed Forces or DND, iba namang aspect yon, ibang aspeto yon. So, ang sinasuggest ko po kanina, baka pwedeng integrated under the DOST para kayo mag-shepherd na mga agencies para lahat mag-cover. Do we need a law for that? I don't think so. Maybe an executive order will do. Just like kasi galing nga ako kanina sa PIDEA DDB budget hearing, meron sila yung EO66 ng Presidente, yung PADS, Philippine Anti-Illegal Drugs Strategy. Maybe following the same concept, pwede ma-integrate natin yung, hindi lang yung pondo, kundi lahat ng efforts under one single agency like the DOST, because yun ang trabaho nyo, science.
Ideal po yun.
What do you need a law to pursue that? Or baka pwedeng i-take up nyo na lang sa Pangulo?
Kaya ko po binanggit yung example ng health ay actually malaki-laki rin naman ang kanilang budget for R&D. Ang iba pong ahensya, ang talagang malaki ang budget ay DA. Actually, noong 1972, ang DA na rin po ang nag-initiate na i-create yung Philippine Council for Agricultural Research and Development under the DOST or at that time NSDB pa. And ang purpose nga nila as you have stated. Kaya lang over the years, they have siyempre created their own research agencies.
Yeah, that's exactly my point kasi merong panahon na iba yung priorities natin kasi iba yung concern. Kung meron nag-guide na isang ahensya, pwedeng i-redirect yung priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Di ba? Dahil sign of the times Ngayon, kung sabog-sabog, kanya-kanya, kurso sila, wala kayong say, wala kayong, sabihin na nating influence, to redirect or to direct the efforts towards whatever research we may need at a certain time. Mas maganda siguro merong gano'n para pwede tayong mag-sway.
So, siguro papadescribe ko lang po kay Asik sa Hagon, ano yung sistema na beyond a certain amount, pinapadaan sa atin ng DBM? Can you explain that?
Yes, sir, because in the General Appropriations Act, meron pong mention on Section 26, I think it's the Harmonized National R&D Agenda, where all government agencies should follow that agenda. So, in a way, we are following a certain agenda for our research and development programs and projects.
Is there any ruling from DBM that beyond a certain amount they want our endorsement?
Yes, sir. Under the same provision, I think 10 or 100 million, 10 million and above. 10 million and above should pass.
That's just for approval,
For approval,
not
sir.
realignment of efforts.
No.
Kasi halimbawa may COVID, di ba dapat ang pagtuunan natin pansin, sabihin natin, vaccine. Eh meron tayong mga available na mga scientists, researchers na pwede naman mag-invento ng vaccine, mag-research. Baka pwedeng yung budget para sa, say, susunod na tanong ko, next topic, yung sa bamboo, yung ballistic resistance, no? But example lang ito, na hindi pa naman siguro kailangan yon, baka yung pera para doon, yung effort para doon, i-direct muna natin para makipag-unahan tayo sa pag-invento ng vaccine on our own because of the pandemic. Kung may control yung DOST ron, mas magandang i-redirect yung effort kesa doon sa more than 100 billion dadaan sa inyo approval, iba yon. It's only whether or not you will approve the use of 100 million pesos in the budget to pursue a certain research program. Magkaiba yun eh. Ang sinasabi ko is holistic talaga. Pwede yun, di ba?
Just express my own personal preference.
We need your thoughts on this.
Kasi po, what we saw in the National Unified Health Research Agenda is that it is doable na magkaayos-ayos talaga in identifying the priorities and the projects. And ang parang nasa isip ko sana, ma-identify yung pinakamalalaking departments na pinakamalalaki ang R&D nila. Kasi doon naman po sa mga maliliit na, sa ibang ahensya, maliit lang naman yung R&D components. Pero for example, if we talk of agriculture, napakalaki po ng budget nila sa R&D. And sa akin, kung magkakaroon ng katulad ng National Unified Health Research Agenda for agriculture, I think that will be, for me,
But we'll do our share, Mr. Secretary.
doable. Oo.
Kasi awkward yung position nyo kung kayo yung magsasuggest kasi kayo yung directly involved. Baka sabihin gusto nyong sakupin yung kami na lang magsasuggest during the plenary debate ng DBCC.
Opo.
I-articulate na lang namin baka pwedeng as a matter of policy, ganun ang gawin.
Opo,
Para hindi na kayo
siyempre, ayaw naman
nasa
namin
awkward na position.
Oo, ayaw din namin
But you're amenable to that. Ano? You will not object or you will not reject.
Ang akin po,
Kasi baka i-voice out namin, tapos sabihin nyo naman na ayaw namin hawakan yan,
hindi po,
mapahiya naman kami.
hindi ko lang alam po kung yung ang mas magandang approach ay yung overall na
Yun nga po.
o i-target natin yung malalaki muna na ahensya na parang maging kamukha nung sa health. Yun po ang...
Kasi para makover ng lahat, integrate na lang natin. Huwag
Isa
na
na
tayo
lang.
mamili ng malalaki muna. Kasi kung gagawin din lang na policy, mas magandang policy sa lahat. Maski yung mga maliliit na portion ng budget para sa R&D, masakop na ng umbrella. Kasi kayo yung logical na lead agency.
Pero yung pong budget ay ibibigay sa DOST?
Not necessarily.
Not
Not necessarily.
So, bibigay pa rin sa mga departments.
Naka-lodge pa rin
Opo.
sa mga department. Pero ang prioritization, merong say ang DOST being the lead
Okay,
agency.
okay po yun. Okay po yun.
Tulad yung nga, sinabi ko kanina, yung sa AO66, yung PAD, merong yung DOH na mahigit sang billion. Tapos merong DILG, meron yung PNP na 600 plus million. Pero DDB yung, maski pa paano, merong say.
Ang idea, ang idea po noon, kahit nasa kanila yung pera, ipadaan pa din doon sa aming councils
Yes.
Kasi may councils eh. Ganun ang nangyayari po sa health eh.
Ay,
Kahit,
ayaw niya naman ng
kahit
council.
nasa kanila yung pera, dumadaan sa Council for Health Research and Development.
Sabi nga ni President Ramos, kung ayaw tapusin ang trabaho, task force ang i-create nyo. O kaya council. Wala matatapos unless a single agency is fully in charge. Maraming trabaho hindi matatapos pagka may council, pagka may committee, pagka may task force. Kaya nga sabi, di ba, kung ayaw tapusin ang trabaho, easy lang yan. Create tayo ng task force.
Yung pong council naman, existing na yung mga yun.
Okay, anyway, so much for that. Para lang nakasingit na kasi ako nakakaya sa mga kasamahan. Yung sa, interesado po ako having come from the security sector, sa armed forces of the PNP. Yung ballistic resistance, yung sa engineered bamboo, sabi nyo, it will cut the price from 2,300, from 16,000 to 2,300. Ang tanong po rito, meron pang recommendation para sa military para i-pursue nila ito. Yung bamboo engineered armored. Yung armored.
Oo.
Interesado po kayo, organic eh. Bamboo, marami tayong bamboo. Kung propagate natin ito, ma-perfect natin, malulumain ka sa atin.
Ongoing na yun, di ba? Ongoing na po yung project na yun eh, in collaboration with the
Rollout na ito, ginagamit na? Or
ongoing na po.
trial?
Ongoing na.
Ongoing, what is the status? On trial po ba siya? Or roll out na po ba ito?
Hindi pa po. Na-approve na namin at na-i-award na namin ng pondo para doon sa proponent na FPRDI, Forest Product Research and Development Institute.
So, kailan pwede ma-roll out ito sa estimate ninyo? Yung para magamit na ng users.
Pwede pong tawagin lang uli natin si Yusek Guevara, yung aming Yusek for R&D.
Yusek Guevara, please respond.
Pwede pong pakiulit nung tanong kasi nag-down yung internet ko kanina po.
Okay, Yusek Guevara. Ang tanong ko lang po, interesado ko doon sa bamboo engineered ballistic resistance, yung invention. Ang tanong ko lang, kasi kanina, kung na-roll out na ito at tinetest na sa field ng military, at kung hindi pa, at ongoing pa yung research at saka mga test, kailan ito posibleng ma-roll out?
Yun pong research matatapos po in another year. So yung rollout po would be 1 year from now po.
I'm sorry, you're saying 1 year yung research and then the rollout?
The rollout kasi magta-transfer po ng technology to a company kasi hindi naman po kami nagmamanufacture. So pag natapos yung research, ita-transfer sa private sector na siya ang magmamanufacture. So pagka nangyari po yun, ang rollout po niyan after 1.5 years from now.
Okay. Thank you, Yusek. That's all for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. We call on Senator Ivy
Mr. Chair,
Marcos.
gusto ko lang sanang banggitin if Senator
Kalimutan
Lacson.
ko lang. And this is a manifestation na rin, no? Parang panawagan rin sa kasabahan ko. Kasi I filed Senate Bill number 1543, yung Virology Institute. And I'd like to request, Mr. Chairperson, I think Senator Binay, kasi funded na ito for 2021. And kung hindi natin maipasa yung batas, baka mabalik sa treasury yung pondo. Baka pwede lang na ma-prioritize na magkaroon ng committee hearing and eventually a committee report is reported out on the floor para lang makakil na natin yung bill. Punan niya pa si Senator Nancy. With all due respect.
Thank you, Senator.
We take note of that, Senator Ping. I couldn't see if Senator Binay is still...
May budget na po ito, proposed budget na
Yes.
283 million.
Yes, and I think it was also mentioned a while ago about the virology, Secretary.
Opo. Isa sa mga pending
Yeah, we'll
bills.
take note of that and we will see to it that to be able to pass this measure. I think this is very important, and we fully support the initiatives of Senator Rappler. Thank you.
Ulit DOST sponsored billion. Ako lang po yung nag-file.
Bait mo naman. Anyway, let's give the floor to Senator Amy because we're running out of time.
Yes, sorry. I'll be very quick. Thank you very much, and we listened very carefully to both the space agency as well as secretary with regard to the satellite development. I think that we all appreciate and congratulate the efforts of the DOST in coming up with the locally produced PCR. Despite the problems that were encountered, nakahanap tayo ng sarili nating testing kit. I am hopeful, however, that with the leg up that the Philippines has in robotics, pwede nating ituloy ito sa telemedicine, sa mga e-surgery and so on. Alam natin na yung ating mga doktor, 43,000 ang sinaservisan, ika nga, ng ating doktor. Sa kakulangan natin ng doktor, iisa lang ang doktor for 43,000 patients. That's a really miserable statistic. As a result, many doctors have now gone to consultation and even physical exam online. Nakaka 20% daw sila ng trabaho dyan. So, given our efforts in robotics, our efforts also in communications networks, community networks, I was going to ask lang the DOST, may follow-up ba yung PCR test ninyo o meron pa kayong mga COVID efforts katulad nung SNT scholarship ninyo? May nakatutok ba dito sa unang-una itong issue ng robotics para sa telemedicine? Kanina nabanggit yung communication, malaking bagay rin yon sa online consultations. At ikatlo, alam ko kasi I have worked with some of them from DOST, yung food tech po ninyo, sana yun ang palaganapin. Kasi yan ang very practical application ng mga research ninyo. Sana alam natin that malnutrition and poverty will increase by at least 20% on account of the COVID. So it's important that we look at that. So itong tatlong bagay lang itatanong ko sa inyo dahil alam niyo, sawang-sawa na yung mga SUC sa amin at makulit ako dyan sa R&D, pati DOST, na dapat problem-driven dahil kasi nagiging solipsistic and occasionally self-indulgent kung ano-ano ang pinagre-research. Dapat may practical application. Rin-recommend ko nga wag nang gumawa ng basic research, kundi yung nasa beta na o di kaya may proof of concept na para pwede nang ibigay sa publiko because after all, public funds should go to the public good, and it's very, very important that an immediate practical application be found. For all our desire to help you with R&D funds, kinakailangan naman yung practical at talagang mapapakinabangan ng tao. So I'd like to inquire about robotics. Magaling naman ang Rizal Tech at yung UP. Meron ba tayong tulong or mga cooperation with DOH, halimbawa?
Thank you, Your Honor. And meron po kaming nakaprepare dito, pero kung gusto nyo, basahin ko pa din yung mga ongoing projects na may kinalaman sa...
Bigay mo na lang sa amin para matuwa naman yung i-submit naman ninyo sa committee. Makababa masyado, Sec?
Sa health research po, tatlo yung talagang napakalaking priorities namin. O pwede sabihin 4. Yung drug discovery is one, yung diagnostic kits is another one, at yung pong mga biomedical devices. So yung listahan po ng biomedical devices, including itong mga may kinalaman sa robotics, at saka itong mga AI and ICT-driven models, yan po ang isa sa mga priorities. So pwede naming
Yun ang sadyang hinihingi nung nagmi-meeting kami tungkol sa telemedicine. Yun ang tulong na sadyang hinihingi ng ating mga physicians. Kasi nga kailangan na kailangan nila yan, palibasa kulang nga yung ating doktor sa ating populasyon. Sige, thank you. Please, if you could submit that, we'd be very grateful. Ikalawa, yung anxiety natin na yung education and other efforts walang mangyari dahil sa kakulangan ng wifi, kahinaan ng internet, baka meron na rin kayong masasubmit tungkol sa mga community networks at LTE. Tuwan-tuwa po kami dun eh.
Yeah. Opo.
And then lastly, eto nga, hindi naman lastly, pero yung sa food tech, kasi nga nangangamba tayo na sadyang magkakaroon ng increase sa poverty levels and real hunger, absolute hunger. So as a result, we'd also like, kasi narinig ko yung iron rice ninyo para sa Bukidnon ng Bayon, para sa mga nangangailangan ng iron, para sa kanilang anemia. Ikakalat pa ba yon? At meron pa ba kayong ibang projects? Because I've been involved with your project sa dehydrated and powdered malunggay, at maganda siyang food supplement sa mga kabataan, ang dali-dali ibigay.
Opo, yung kasing mga private sector na nag-ooperate na ng processing para dyan sa mga natural products na yan, ay lumalabas na sila sa ibang region ngayon, pumupunta na sila sa ibang region dahil malaki yung requirement po doon sa raw material input. So halimbawa, yung nagpo-process na nandun sa Bulacan ay nakarating na sa Isabela para magpatanim ng mga malunggay at ng mga turmeric. At ngayon ay kinausap na siya ng aming director sa Region 1 na kung pwedeng maglagay na rin doon sa Region 1 ng mga taniman na yon dahil kaya-kaya naman daw na mag-partner sila. So,
kung sana pwede kami bigyan ng mga ganyan kasi yan yata yung mga practical, immediate, quick wins na hinahanap ni Chairman Angara rin para mabigyan kayo ng budget kasi makikita ka agad na very responsive kayo sa kinakailangan ng tao. Ngayon, ang follow-up question ko dyan, napansin ko dun sa PCR kit, nung na-develop ninyo, private company nag-take over. Nung na-develop ninyo yung dehydrated malunggay Instamills, private companies na rin or NGOs katulad ng Negros ang nag-take over. Ano ba yung sistema dyan? Kasi halimbawa yung benta ng private company, saksakan ng mahal. Abay, gobyerno naman ang nag-develop niyan. Tama ba yung contractual setup niyan?
Yun po ang provided sa Technology Transfer Act.
That's right. That's right. To your mind, should government get involved in the production of these products that were researched, developed, and finalized by DOST or other government SUCs or research institutions? Ano pa talaga dapat?
Wala naman pong bawal doon. In fact, yung pong aming mga complementary food production para sa malnutrition ay karamihan ay LGUs ang nag-ooperate.
That's right. NGOs actually kesa sa LGUs sa totoo lang. Yun nga ang hihingin ko sana. Yung sa communications, yung community networks, do you have more information kung saan na yan na ipilot, kung ano pa yung kailangan ninyo dyan?
Ginagawa pa po yung listahan kung saan kasi kailangan din namin ng data from DICT.
Siyempre.
Talaga yung hindi nararating ng kanilang ng mga telcos. Kaya yung 10 na aming ibinudget for this year ay kasalukuyang pang inaalam kung alin ba talaga yung mga remote places na walang nakakarating na connectivity.
Well, we have to assume that there are very, very many remote places po kasi talagang wala. Higit sa lahat doon sa mga bulubundukin at yung mga isla, kasama na rin yung barm, talagang alam natin ni cellphone site, wala yan. Kaya kailangan magsitulungan. And also, do you have ongoing cooperation with the military for surveillance and other efforts?
Marami po yun sana ang sasabihin ko kanina na pwede naman magbigay ng briefing. Kaya lang hindi po namin ito pinapublish sa media
Kaya syempre naman, kaya lang, hihingi ako kung papayag si Vice Chair Joel ng listahan yan kasi alam naman natin ang internet, demilitarized technology yan. Alam natin yung Israel, halos lahat ng kanilang technology nag-uumpisa as military tools. So sana yung mga de-weaponized, halimbawa, o di kaya cooperatively developed, malaman din namin para mapondohan rin namin yung iba dyan kasi gustong-gusto namin tumulong sa R&D. Yun nga lang, as I said, they have to be problem-driven and not indulgent of our own scientific theories. They really should have practical application. Yun lang po. So, request for information lang.
Very happy.
Yes, request for information. I'm very, very interested po.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yes, that's it. Basically, I'm requesting any studies or cooperation or other ventures that you have with regard to telemedicine, yung mga robotics and AI na hinihingi ng ating mga doktor. Ikalawa, yung practical application din po sana sa communications, yung tinatawag na community networks and LTE. Kasi alam naman natin na sakit ng ulo ng bawat nanay kung paano mag-aaral yung anak na walang wifi. Ikatlo, yung food technology to address malnutrition kasi na-anticipate na natin na lolobo ang hanay na mahihirap. At ikaapat, kung gusto ninyo confidential or nasa privileged information, yung mga cooperative R&D po ninyo with the military na makakatulong higit sa lahat sa surveillance. So maraming salamat po. That will be it. Thank you, Joel. Thanks, Coco.
Okay.
Chairman, kung may time pa.
Ng sinabi ninyo.
Thank you, Senator Amy, and please comply with all the requests of our dear colleagues. I know we are pressed for time. I know a lot of us are hungry, and we couldn't have lunch. But I would just raise some very short issues. Perhaps I'd be dwelling in just two issues, Secretary. First is let me put on record that most of us here in the Senate are supportive of R&D. We are all aware of its importance. In fact, we have been saying, and we sound like a broken record, that now is the best time to innovate. And it's good to know that when we started this hearing, you made mention about our placing in the innovative index from 100 plus to 51, and it's such a 15, no? And it's such a great feat. And I think we need to do more, and we are here to help. We are here to support. One issue that I'd like to raise is the involvement or the engagement of the department with higher education institutions. I know that higher education institutions play a huge role in the DOST's Science for Change program, which seeks to accelerate science and technology innovations, o yung STI in the country, with the help of R&D institutions and other stakeholders. In fact, Mr. Secretary, this representation worked very hard last year to put in at least funding for every single state colleges and universities all over the country, of course, with the help of my colleagues, especially Senator Angara, who is the chair of the Committee on Finance. So may I just get a bird's eye view of the status of this program? How is it helping? What more can we do? And perhaps if you can give me the figure as to how many higher education institutions in total are currently benefiting from this grants in aid program of the DOST and its attached agencies. Sir.
Yes, Your Honor. First of all, I would like to mention that in the case of scholarships, okay, the SUCs do not require an accreditation level for our scholars to go there. In other words, basta offered sa SUC ang kurso, pwede pumunta doon ang DOST scholar. Unlike in the private universities, they should achieve a certain level of accreditation. Pangalawa po, yung aming programs for the masters and PhD ay meron tayong tatlong consortia involving the universities, particularly many of them are actually SUCs in implementing our MS and PhD scholarships. Now, with respect to the research and development, actually po, most of the grants and aid goes to higher educational institutions and SUCs in particular. And
Right now, how many po in total yan?
itatanong ko po ulit kay Yusek Guevara yung total, pero ang binanggit ko po kanina ay yung pagkaka-put up namin ng 24 needs research centers for the regions. Ito po ay nakakalat sa mga SUCs.
That's good, Secretary. Just to clarify, you have right now 24 niche o yung niche centers in the region.
Needs research
established.
centers in the
24 ho.
24, pero meron din doon private po. Kasi siguro mga 5 doon ay private universities also.
Okay, out of the 24.
Out of the 24.
Can we also get the list of that, Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, of course, we have the so-called collaborative projects with industry na required doon na ang kanilang kapartner ay universities. And we also have the figures for that. And so far, we have 49 approved projects, many of these involving SUCs. Now, ang number of SUCs that have received grants in aid for research and development, yun ang itatanong ko kay Yusek Guevara. But ang masasabi ko po accomplishment dyan, kung nung dati ay puro dito lang sa malalaking university sa Maynila ang nakapokus yung grants in aid, ngayon po ay nakakalat na all over. So maybe we can just submit separately.
Thank you. Sige, isama na lang din po yun for submission. Perhaps another question is how many HEIs have ongoing collaborations with industry stakeholders under your cradle? Ang ganda ho nitong program, itong collaborative research and development to leverage Philippine economy. Can we...
32
32
HEIs
yan.
servicing 50 industry partners.
Okay, 32 servicing 50 industry partners. That's good. And we plan to increase this 32, Your Honor?
Yeah, because we are in the process of evaluating the new proposals for 2021.
Budget for 2020 is only 125 million, no? For Cradle, is that correct? And for 2021, how much would that be? Nag-increase ho ba? Yung Cradle ho.
Cradle, pero bang breakdown?
20.
I think it's important kasi yung collaborative research na ibabangga ka agad doon sa industry's requirement. So ito very interested po tayo dito, and if there's also a need, I think this is a priority if there's a need for funding to reach our target in this particular item. Siguro pa-submit na lang, Secretary. I know we are pressed for time.
I-ano na lang po namin. If you Keb sana can give the figures. I hope donate lahat naman sa bigyan.
Yes. Another is how many publicly funded R&D projects are currently being undertaken by higher education institutions in collaboration with DOST? Would you know?
Ako, hindi ko po masasagot ngayon. At,
okay. Kasi we wanted to find out also how much of your budget from DOST budget for each of the fiscal years 2020 and in the coming 2021 support yung R&D projects of HEIs.
We will submit that.
As I mentioned earlier, this representation is very interested about it. And last year, we put in additional funding for every HUC. So we wanted to help on that particular item. And of course, we commend DOST for recognizing the role of higher education institutions in advancing research and development in the country. Another issue that I'm very interested, as I mentioned, two issues na lang ho yung i-raise ko, is the targets and implementation program ng setup po natin at saka CES, because these two particular program of DOST generated a lot of direct and indirect employment. And ako ho, Secretary, lagi kong sinasabi dito sa Senado na ako'y isang buhay na patotoo na makita ko po yung effects ho nito, no? And in fact, I have here with me in 2018-2019 data na itong CES at setup generated 227,146 direct and indirect employment. Kaya ho, I'm a believer of this particular project because this means that the science and technology, livelihood, and assistance programs of DOST benefits at least, annually. You're looking at least 100,000 workers annually. So, Secretary, perhaps may question lang is yung status ng setup at itong CES. Maapektuhan ba? Lumaki ba yung pondo natin? Mas lalaki ba yung program natin about this? I was kind of worried a while ago when ASEC Sahagun made mention about congressional initiatives being placed under the for later release. Secretary, this representation made some institutional amendments last year in this particular items, and I was also told that it's still under FLR. So I wanted to find out kung maapektuhan ngayon yung ating inaasahan na programa that will create jobs, will generate employment, direct and indirect employment. Thank you, Secretary.
Yung pong aming budget for setup since 2018 ay hindi nagbabago. 847, ano ba ito?
847 million.
844. And unfortunately, wala namang idinadagdag sa 2021 net. Kaya nga po, kanina nung tinanong ko ni Senator Lacson kung ano yung mga priorities ko dun sa mga hindi na-approve dun sa aming Tier 2, ang una kong sinabi ay yung grants in aid for research and development at 2.112 billion, and then the region programs which include setup, CEST, and their local R&D, which is 1.221 billion.
Yes, yung sa CEST po, magkano yung budget for this year and last year? There are different because in setup almost the same way. And Secretary, we don't want to forget, no, you made mention about your top list, no, yung sa research, and then yung sa regional setup and CES. Dun sa 2 point something billion that you mentioned, kasama na ho yun yung sa CES and setup. You were wishing na maging part ng budget. Is that correct?
Magkaiba po yung sinabi kong grants in aid for
yes,
R&D.
I understand, but the regional na sinabi nyo, I think if I'm not mistaken,
1.2
billion. Kasama po doon yung setup and CES.
Yun po ang main, yun ang main.
Yun ang main.
Oo.
Okay. Yeah, siguro ang maganda rin po, Secretary, when you submit this, yung sinasabi natin, no? Kasi ang ganda ho nitong programs na ito, itong dalawang programs na ito na naka-set up, itong set up at CES doon sa mga regional centers natin, and it creates employment, no? Direct and indirect employment. Siguro doon sa submission ho ninyo, isama na rin ho natin kung ano yung projection natin.
Bukod pa po yun yung aming plano, Dr. Jojo, yung para naman sa IFWD, yung Innovations for Filipinos Working Distantly from the Philippines. Po yung mga umuwing OFWs na wala nang balak bumalik. So, siguro, Jojo, meron ka ba indication kung magkano ang kailangan doon na wala pa tayong pera?
Because at this time, you're saying it's not part of the budget proposal, no? Sige nga ho, Director.
Halimbawa for 2021. Well, of course, sa December, we expect to release certain money out of our own regular budget. But for 2021, napupursi po namin na dadagsayan eh.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
magkano kaya, Jojo, kailangan?
What are your projections, sir? Please.
Yeah. Maraming salamat, Your Honor. For 2020 right now, what we have right now available fund na dapat maging available sa amin is 5 million only. Kasi yung I Forward Philippines will be only providing at the most 250,000 for each OFW that will be able to establish a technology-based enterprise. However, if we are going to roll out this to the regional offices where most of the OFWs are right now, I think 5 million each for the regional offices will be kulang talaga, Your Honor.
So ang projection nyo at least 5 million per region.
At the least.
At
But
the least.
we will be able to cater to at least 20 OFWs only.
That's only for 20 OFW.
If we are talking here of 250,000 per OFW.
Anyway, sige, isama nyo na lang sa submit dito sa committee so we can further study. Secretary, how many MSMEs have you assisted under the Small Enterprise Technology Upgrading program in 2019 and 2020? And perhaps yung target po natin sa 2021. With that in mind, we wanted to find out ano yung capacity din naman natin kung lalakihan natin ito hanggang saan yung capacity natin to reach that particular target. Sige po.
Po kasing figures dito, yung assisted, ito yung iba-ibang forms of assistance through setup. Pero yung talagang nag-i-involve ng actual provision of hardware, for example, Jojo, ilan yun per year? 800 ba? Or maybe I should call Yusek Brenda if you can provide us the figures here, because the items enumerated here are 23,400. These books
Yes.
Sige, Yusek, are you online? Can you help us?
Yusek Brenda, please.
Yes, Yusek, you're recognized.
Projects, or that's equivalent to firms funded in 2019 po ay around 784, with a total budget po natin ay 820 million po. For the 2019 po yun. So far, for 2020, 737 ang as to date or pino-project natin na ma-fund na number of projects, or that's equivalent also to the number of firms out of the 706 million.
And for 2021, the proposed
is basically also about kasi pareho din yung budget ng 2019, yung 2021. So it would be around 800 million, 800 firms.
800 firms then.
Yeah, at least 800 firms.
Okay. And kung madadagdagan natin ito, siguro pasubmit na lang no yung projection natin. Kung dadagdagan natin, ito yung target natin. How much do we have to augment, Your Honor?
Yes, pa. We'll do that, pa. Thank you, pa.
Due to the lateness of the hour and because the DOST and the PhilSA
One question, sir. Pwede?
family. Yes, sure. Senator Coco, please.
Secretary, yung i-pursue ko yung point ni Senator Marcos, when the DOST researches, puts in intellectual property, and then the product is now good for commercial use, and then a private entity makes profit out of the commercial use of the product researched by the DOST, is the government compensated in any way?
Opo, we can submit a report on the licensing arrangements and the amounts that have been paid by the firms for the use of the technology. So meron po silang royalties that they pay.
Okay, because that is the standard way of compensating for intellectual property anyway, di ba, Secretary?
It is also a provision of the Technology Transfer Act.
Okay. Sige.
That
Okay, so
actually the income from royalties, nothing goes to the funding agency. Like if the OST funded it, nothing goes to us, but it will go to the implementing agency. So if, for example, University X implemented the research project, the income from royalties will go to them, but it has to be divided between the institution and the researchers. So under our Magna Carta for Science Workers, there is a provision that the royalties will not go below 40% going to the researchers.
good. Okay, thank you for that answer, Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coco. If I may, again, we'd like to thank our resource persons present here today, Secretary De La Peña of DOST, PhilSA Director General Joel Marciano, our DOST Undersecretaries and Assistant Secretaries. They're all physically present here. Thank you for coming today to discuss your budget for next year. Thank you to our dear colleagues, physically present, Senator Lacson, and virtually present, our distinguished colleagues from Ilocos, Senator Aimee, Senator Coco from Mindanao, Senator Sani Angara, our chair, Senator Bongo, Senator Binay, and the rest. We again like to thank your participation. Tulad po ng mga binanggit natin kanina, wala pong nakuhang dagdag pondo ang DOST sa Bayanihan 1 at Bayanihan 2, ngunit nagawan po ng pamunuan nila na mag-adjust at masuportahan yung mga pangangailangan natin dito sa COVID response ng ating gobyerno. 1.4 billion pa ang ibinalik ng DOST, ngunit nakapag-ambag pa rin sila para matulungan ang ating mamamayan. At ito pong inyong performance, Secretary, ay sumasalamin sa pagiging maparaan nating mga Pilipino. Kaya po muli nating ipinagdidiinan yung kahalagahan ng innovation sa gitna ng panahon ng pandemya. This is the best time to innovate. Now is the right time to innovate. Likas po sa itong katangian sa ating mamamayan, kaya suportado po natin ang adhikain na paglaanan pa ng pondo ang karagdagang research and development para sa samot-saring programa ng DOST. Sinusuportahan po natin yung panawagan ng DOST na palawigin pa ang mga scholarship programs para umaabot po natin yung target na 380 researchers, scientists, engineers o RSE per 1 million Filipinos in 2022. Sa ngayon po kasi, as mentioned by Secretary De La Peña, nasa 280 RSE per 1 million population po tayo. At tunay pong panahon talaga na bigyan natin ng halaga yung research dahil napag-iwanan na po tayo sa kabuuang gross domestic product natin. And this was raised by Senator Coco, Senator Aimee, and other senators. 0.15% lang po ng GDP ang kabuuang gastos ng private and public sector sa research, at malayong-malayo po ito doon sa 1% of GDP na recommended expenditure. It is also clear to us about Philippine Space Agency's value proposition, and we can say that the agency has the support of this chamber in helping improve our internet services through satellite technology and the likes, at yung iba pang mga nabanggit po ninyo. Given the increased demand of our students and the workers for better connectivity, kasi we hope that PhilSA would be able to do its share to the development of satellites. Whether tumanay tayo yung gagawa o tayo sasakay, mapag-aralan po natin itong gusto. We look forward also to enabling more community-based cellular networks, especially those in geographically located and disadvantaged areas. Marami po tayong nabanggit kanina tungkol dun sa setup at CES. Gusto nating tutukan ito, Secretary, and we're very interested doon sa program ng DOST in generating employment, direct and indirect employment through these two programs. Sa kabuuan, we'd like to thank everyone, and we would like to put on record that the budget of DOST and PhilSA is now deemed submitted for plenary action subject for today's discussion and submission of documents requested by this representation and our colleagues. So maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. The committee hearing of Subcommittee J of the Committee on Finance is hereby suspended. Maraming salamat, Secretary. Maraming salamat po sa ating lahat. God bless us all.
Joel, and thank you to all this. We learned so